The chill that clung to the echoing vault of Harrenhal's Hall of 100 Hearths seemed to seep into Maester Aemon's very marrow as the assembled lords cried his name, Aemon, 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 like seabirds wheeling above a storm-tossed coast. He felt each syllable land upon him with the weight of cold iron, a crown hammered into shape by echoes, expectation, and the long, bloody ledger of his forebears. He had come to the great council robed in the muted grays and whites of the citadel, the heavy maester's chain straining his neck like a quiet penance for sins never committed, and yet the realm now demanded he exchange that burden of service for the heavier one of rule. His heart rebelled. He had sworn himself to knowledge, to duty unmarred by power's temptations. But the Lord saw only the blood of the dragon in his veins and the beacon of stability he might kindle in a realm still trembling from his father Mikar's sudden death. The torches guttered, and the pungent smoke of pitch and cedar mingled with the musk of damp stone. Lord Lionel Baratheon's booming voice offered the first formal acclaim, a clap of thunder that rolled through the hall, igniting other voices in its wake. Lord Celtigar, ancient and crab-like, jabbed the air with a knotted finger as he listed Aemon's virtues in a reedy whisper that carried nonetheless. Even dour Lord Stark of Winterfell inclined his head, the wolf acknowledging, if grudgingly, the dragon's right. Aemon's brother Aegon, Egg no longer, but a lean, weather-worn knight who had served in ditches and mews and halls from Pentos to Dorne, stood beside him in a plain wool surcoat the color of old parchment. Egg's violet eyes glittered with something like relief, though sorrow threaded its way through the smile he tried to offer. Aemon had known that look since childhood, the expression of a boy who would throw himself before a charging horse to spare another pain, even if it meant his own bones would crack. "Brothers?" Aemon murmured, low enough that only Egg could hear. "Can one crown sit upon two heads?" "It must not," Egg answered, "but one heart may guide two hands. I will be your shield as I was Mikar's sword." Those words, simple and honest, tipped the scales. Aemon felt the last anchor lines to the life he had chosen for himself snap in an instant, cast adrift by duty's inexorable tide. He stepped forward, letting the council's roar wash over him like rain upon stone. "I will not refuse," he declared, voice resonant, clear, and unshaking despite the maelstrom within. "Though I prayed to serve in darkness, I shall now strive to rule in light. Let my reign be a lantern against chaos, and let it burn with justice rather than dragonfire." Thus was the fate of Westeros rewritten. The procession from Harrenhal to King's Landing unfurled like a budding rose of banners across the riverlands. Gold cloaks, stark gray direwolves, Tully trout, Lannister lions, each house added its colors to Aemon's slow-moving cortege. The newly crowned king rode not a tall destrier but a placid dappled palfrey, the gray of cracked marble, choosing humility over grandeur. The choice stirred gossip in every crossroads inn. Some hailed it as the sign of a scholar king, while others muttered it was a weakness that boded ill when Blackfire pretenders still schemed across the narrow sea. At night, when the small folk thronged the camp's periphery with torches held high, Aemon walked among them unarmored, offering gentle words and listening to woes as varied as ill harvests, bandit raids, and broken betrothals. He tallied each sorrow in memory as precisely as he once tallied candles in the starry September's library. Egg watched all, remaining half a pace behind. Not the overshadowed younger brother, but the silent storm wall against which any dagger of malice might break. He slept little, speaking by day to Ser Duncan the Tall, now Lord Commander of Aemon's Kingsguard, about lines of defense, about the thin trickle of crown revenue, about the grain shortages that whispers said might swell to famine if spring proved late. It was Duncan who insisted that ravens race ahead, charging stewards in each holdfast to store barley and oats, even if it meant the royal treasury would be bled near dry. Aemon assented without hesitation. "Better an empty coffer's room than empty bellies," he said, and in that decree seeds of loyalty were planted more deeply than swords could ever carve. A sun-hazed dawn greeted their arrival at the capital. Fleets of gulls spun above the masts in Blackwater Bay, while the Red Keep's towers shone like crimson glaives. Yet Aemon felt the fortress loom less like a citadel of power than a cage of history, its walls slick with centuries of whispered betrayals. The coronation was simple by Targaryen standards. Aemon declined the traditional tourney, declining also the wildfire-lit night displays that pyromancers proposed. Rather, he stood before the Iron Throne in the Great Hall, clad in a tunic of deep wine-red velvet, trimmed only at the throat with Maester's gray. Septons droned, banners rustled, bells pealed. But the pivot of the ceremony came when Aemon lifted his own Maester's chain and set it into a velvet chest borne by Grand Maester Norrin. Symbol and sacrifice entwined, hammered home by the hush that fell as the old chain's links clinked shut behind the lid. When they lowered the king's crown upon his brow, forged anew from Valyrian steel filigreed with rubies in the shape of 7-pointed stars, Aemon's eyes closed. In that moment he whispered a prayer not to the gods but to the memory of the brothers who had come before. Dauntless Daeron II, doomed Baelor Breakspear, proud Mikar, and vowed that his reign would redeem the sorrow each had known. Only those close enough heard the faint groan of metal as Aemon eased into the Iron Throne's jagged embrace, the barbs scraping cloth, the steel as warm as living flesh beneath him. It was said afterward that no king had ever looked so out of place and yet so inevitable upon that seat of swords. The first edicts unfurled like quiet snow across the realm. Aemon ordered grain levies reduced in the reach to ferry surplus northward, staving off hunger in frost-blighted villages along the neck. He pardoned minor poachers ensnared by draconian forest laws, insisting that one man's rabbit should not cost a hand. Small reforms, but each a stone cast into a still pond. Ripples carried far, unsettling those who preferred the water stagnant. In the smoky backrooms of King's Landing, moneylenders grumbled that interest caps trimmed their purses. Lords who had grown fat on tariffs smoldered when the crown renegotiated port fees to favor fisherfolk. Yet for every sneer from gilded balconies, cheers rose like a tide from cobbled alleys. Not all welcomed the new dawn. Across the sea, in Tyrosh, the Blackfire claimant Demon III tasted opportunity. A scholar king, they said, one whose love of books would make him soft clay to be shaped by sharper wills. Gold and swords began to flow again through secret channels, and whispers of a fourth Blackfire rebellion coiled through the stepstones like venomous snakes. Within the Red Keep, Lord Commander Duncan sensed the shift in the wind before any raven reached them. He urged double watches along the walls, had Egg drill the gold cloaks until the city rang with the clangor of blunted steel. Aemon listened, and though he loathed the pageantry of power, he did not ignore the threat. He convened a council of war, drawing Lord Tully, Lord Stark, and even wary Lord Hightower under one roof. They spoke not of conquest but of unity. Roads needed mending, garrisons needed pay, septons needed shelter to keep faith from crumbling where famine nipped. Aemon's strategy was simple: bind the realm with mutual obligation, so that any foreign sword would find no purchase. He offered low-interest loans to lords willing to fund orphanages and granaries. He promised knighthoods to common soldiers who held border castles against raiders. Some mocked the measures as bleeding heart fantasies. Yet as winter's edge glimmered and withdrew, wagons bearing reach wheat arrived in White Harbor. In exchange, sturdy Northman timber traveled south, reinforcing dike works near Old Town that had long threatened to crumble. Throughout it all, Aemon refused to raise taxes upon the poor, instead pruning extravagant tourneys, curbing the crown's pride. Egg, restless by nature, found his place not atop council benches but astride a courser patrolling the King's Road. He rode in plain armor, his helm unadorned, answering petitions personally, posting notices that the King's Justice rode with him. By dusk, campfires flickered where small folk shared soup with the prince who would never be king. One such night, a ragged hedge knight brought dire news. Mercenaries had been spotted mustering in lists, ships chartered under false names. Egg dispatched ravens and then spurred south without awaiting permission. The moon was a broken silver plate as he raced down the Rose Road, Duncan at his side. They reached Highgarden on the wings of dawn. Lord Lionel Tyrell, florid and canny, confirmed that sail sails crept along the narrow sea like storm cloud shadows. Blackfire sigils whispered to be among them. He murmured over maps spread before a fragrant garden arbor. Egg sat back, eyes narrow. If they land, peasant and lord alike will bleed. Best we prune the weeds before they root. Yet war was not so easily chosen. Egg's message to Aemon arrived with 3 seals cracked and resealed by hands both eager and reluctant, a testament to the court's anxiety. By the time the Raven's twin brother winged southward in reply, Aemon's answer shocked half the realm. He would parley. The king's ship, the Silver Quill, cut through gray waves under skies thick with storm portent. Aemon stood at the prow, cloak snapping like a torn page, while behind him the red keep shrank to a crimson spire swallowed by the haze. He had chosen a handful of companions. Egg, Ser Duncan, Septon Whaleys, whose mild voice could turn iron hearts, and Mistress Cecilia, a low-born healer from Flea Bottom whose knowledge of flux fevers had saved hundreds during the last summer pox. Court factions fumed that the king sailed with no great lords, yet Aemon's logic was as sharp as Valyrian glass. For every proud lord insulted by exclusion, another was spared a chance to betray ambition. The parley took shape on the rocky Isle of Bloodstone, neutral ground ringed by reefs like jagged teeth. Demon 3 Blackfire arrived with a modest retinue of armored exiles, banners wet with spray. Between the parties, a single plank bridge spanned tidal pools boiling with sea urchins. There, beneath a sky bruised violet, king and pretender faced one another. Demon was younger than the song suggested, his Blackfire blade strapped across his back, its hilt a dark twin to Aegon the Conqueror's. His eyes held the reckless zeal of men who mistake destiny for invulnerability. Bastard crown upon bastard brow, he scoffed, voice carrying across the waves. Aemon answered softly, blood does not confer truth, nor swords justice. Tell me what grievance drives you to drown Westeros in grief again. The pretender jeered, but Egg stepped forward, hand resting casually upon the hilt of a long sword dinged and plain. Listen, he said, steel lurking beneath courtesy. My brother will meet you steel for steel if need be, but he offers words first. Words weigh less than coffins. What followed became legend. 2 hours of debate that uncoiled like a serpent across shifting sands. Aemon offered titles to Blackfire loyalists, lands to those dispossessed, and amnesty to any who bent the knee within a year. But he refused to yield the Iron Throne, nor would he acknowledge Daemon's claim as anything but sedition. Tension mounted until even gulls fell silent. Then Septon Whaleys spoke, invoking the Seven's mercy, reminding Daemon of the spring sickness that had taken 90,000 souls in King's Landing alone decades earlier. Shall we spill more blood to fill the gutters anew? The Septon asked, tears bright in lined eyes. Some say it was that raw plea. Others claim Daemon glimpsed in Aemon the mirror of the king he might have become without bitterness. Whatever the seed, doubt sprouted. Daemon demanded gold to settle his companies and safe passage to the east. Aemon granted both, but with one bond. Daemon would leave his daughter Rhaena as a ward at court, raised beside Aemon's newborn niece Diella, forging kinship in lieu of chains. Against the counsel of his fiercest captains, Daemon accepted. Black sails departed Bloodstone, fading like bruises from the horizon. The 4th Blackfire rebellion ended without a cry of war, bewildering chroniclers then and forever. Peace, however, can be more perilous than war. The Iron Bank of Bravos grumbled at the loss of interest payments they had expected from a protracted conflict. Across the narrow sea, disgruntled Sellswords began freelancing as pirates. At home, lords whose coffers swelled on wartime tariffs found their purses light and their pride bruised. Within the Red Keep, factions coalesced. The so-called Sable Circle, Lords Arryn, Rowan, and Merryweather, whispered that Aemon's mercy made the realm ripe for extortion. Meanwhile, the White Council, led by Egg, Duncan, and the Tyrell heiress Lady Olenna, whose barbed wit was matched only by her grasp of coin flow, plotted sweeping infrastructural reforms. Roads, aqueducts, granaries that would anchor prosperity for generations. Aemon facilitated every voice, convening nightly symposia in the old library wing. Scrolls crackled under candle flame as lords unfamiliar with letters found themselves debating grain yield charts and floodplain maps. Some scoffed at the king's scholars' governance. Others, once they glimpsed the ledger balances, became converts to his quiet revolution. Ironworkers in Tumbleton found new employment forging water wheels instead of swords. In Dorne, Brooks once bone-dry ran again where crown-funded engineers constructed modest cannons. The people named Aemon the Lantern of Westeros, and small folk carved his likeness into harvest loaves, a tradition born from gratitude rather than fear. Yet even lanterns cast shadows. In the Vale, Lord John Shed of Gulltown, heavy with debt and wounded pride, nursed resentment until it festered into treason. He allied with corsairs along the disputed lands, funding raids on crown shipments of grain. In the Riverlands, bandit companies exploited reduced tariffs to smuggle stolen wool to Myr, draining local economies. Aemon responded not with wildfire but with ink and empathy. He dispatched Mistress Ysilla north to treat plague pockets, her success buying goodwill that swords could not. He granted Lord Tyto's Blackwood authority to muster militias, pairing iron with fairness. And he decreed that any lord found abetting pirates would forfeit twice the losses they inflicted, payable in soldiers if coin ran short. Then he journeyed himself to Gulltown, unannounced, clothed like a traveling septon. There, in Lord Shet's own hall, he recited the debts in meticulous order and offered restructuring that spared Gulltown ruin yet saved face. Shet, shaken by the king's presence and shamed before his own retainers, bent the knee before the hearth, tears hissing on embers. Thus did rebellion end in confession rather than battle. Years unfurled. The small folk spoke of Queen Alyssa, Egg's clever Lyseni bride, who championed spinning guilds so widows might earn coin. They spoke of Princess Rena Blackfire, ward-turned-confidant, who corresponded in coded quatrains with poets from Karth and Myr, enriching the court's culture. They spoke of Duncan, the tall's knighthood contests open to any freeborn lad who could land 3 blows against him. Though none succeeded, many discovered purpose in striving. And they spoke in softer voices of the dragons. For all Aemon's enlightenment, the skulls still lined the throne room like silent judges. Rumors claimed that in the cellars beneath the dragon pit, fires sometimes flickered where none should burn, as if embers of an older world awaited a breath to blaze anew. Archmaester Barth's lost tomes circulated in clandestine copies, hinting that Dragonseed might yet quicken if given warmth, blood, and song. Aemon read each parchment with cautious fascination but forbade experiments. The last dragons brought sorrow more than splendor, he told Egg one night as summer lightning spider-webbed the sky. Let knowledge be our legacy, not flame. Still, the realm dreamed. In the free cities, merchant princes pondered what a hatchling under Aemon's control would mean for trade. In Skagos, old priests muttered that wind-winged shadows would again shade the moon. And in the bowels of the Red Keep, Grand Maester Norrin confessed to Septon Whaleys that he sometimes heard the earth sigh, as if something vast shifted in restless sleep. When the first earthquake rattled King's Landing, a low rumble that shivered crockery and set bells singing by themselves, Aemon convened astronomers and stonemasons alike. They blamed shifting fault lines, though small folk swore they heard a dragon's heartbeat beneath the cobbles. Weeks later, fissures split the cobbled path leading to the dragon pit. Sulfuric steam hissed upward. Rats fled in black tides. Egg stationed companies of engineers to seal cracks with mortar laced in powdered jade. The substance hardened like stone kissed by dragonfire, a formula discovered in ancient Valyrian notes. Yet each dawn, new cracks spidered. It was Ser Duncan who first voiced the fear that others dared not. Something stirred below, ancient and hungry. Aemon listened, sober. He summoned Rena Blackfire, whose fascination with old lore had grown into mastery of tongues dead 1,000 years. Together they pored over obsidian plaques recovered from Valyrian ruins. Symbols spoke of slumbering children of the sky, imprisoned beneath crumbling temples of man's pride. All signs pointed to the dragon pit, on the night of the blood moon, so called when the lunar disk rose red as fresh spill. Aemon walked alone into that shattered dome. The air smelt of ashes and sea salt, strange under the dry summer sky. He carried no torch, only a slender dagger forged of castle-forged steel, its edge unremarkable save for the name Wisdom etched upon its fuller. He descended spiral stairs slick with dew into catacombs where skulls larger than ox carts brooded in darkness. There, the tremors grew rhythmic like titanic breaths. He knew then that dragons, or something older still, pressed against the veil of stone. Voice steady, he began to sing, a hymn of the seven, though his Targaryen blood remembered another, fiercer rhythm threaded through the melody. The walls hummed in resonance. Embers lit along cracks like stars kindled. Then silence fell, heavy and complete. When Aemon emerged at dawn, the fissures had closed as if never there. The realm exhaled. Some claimed it miracle. Others whispered darker bargains. Aemon spoke of it to no one, save Egg, and even then only to say, "Let dragons lie, brother. The realm can ill afford fires it cannot contain." Years rolled on, calm yet taut as a bowstring. Across the seas, the Blackfire line faded into obscurity, their ambition gentled by marriages brokered into respectable merchant houses. At home, harvests waxed under improved irrigation. Literacy climbed, petty wars dwindled. The Maesters recorded that violent crime fell so steeply in King's Landing that the black cells stood half empty, a sight unseen since Aegon's conquest. In Old Town, Maester Peristan compiled the Codex Aemonis, a treatise on governance by calm passion. The work circulated among free city scholars, sparking reforms in distant Lys and Norvos. Aemon never claimed authorship. The realm simply called the book the Lantern's Light. But peace breeds complacency. By Aemon's 20th year upon the throne, his beard silvered, his eyes ringed by study's vigil, some young lords saw him as an aging candle flickering low. They whispered of rekindling the realm's martial glory. A cabal formed, fiery Lord Grafton of Gulltown reborn under new arrogance, Ser Tybolt Lannister hungry for conquest, and Ser Euron of the Shield Isles, whose piratical forebears still haunted the Stepstones. They plotted to seize Dragonstone, rumored vault of secrets and perhaps Eggs long petrified yet not dead. With such power, they argued, Westeros might bend the free cities to heal, carve colonies along Esso's shore, secure endless grain and gold. The conspiracy's web tightened until even the Kingsguard could not entirely pluck its threads. Yet one thread reached Egg, who still traveled the realm in plain armor despite hair now salted with white. Asel's word, once saved by Egg from plague in Tyrosh, revealed the whispers in return for pardon. Egg rode gray-scarred roads as in his youth, his thoughts a storm. "Brother," he said upon arriving breathless in the Red Keep, "they court wildfire. Dragons or no, ambition's blaze will consume us." Aemon stood by a window overlooking the Blackwater, its waves painted gold by sunset. "Then we must bank the flames before they catch," he replied. He convened his council, not in secret but in the full light of day. Lords Arryn, Hightower, and Baratheon stood beside him. He laid bare the conspiracy, naming each lord and knight with evidence beyond dispute. Letters sealed yet intercepted, ledgers paid in Lysine gold, ship manifests forged. The accused arrived under safe conduct, expecting denial and obfuscation, but found transparency a blade sharper than any Valyrian steel. Confronted publicly, stripped of the shadows in which treason thrives, most knelt in open shame. Aemon's mercy extended once more. Titles diminished by half, fortunes levied to fund schools and infirmaries. Only Ser Euron refused, fleeing to the Shield Isles where he crowned himself Storm King beyond the Reach. Egg led a fleet southward, swift and decisive. The war lasted 39 days and ended with Ser Euron's head spiked upon his own half-built throne of driftwood. Peace resumed, not fragile but tempered, like iron quenched in cool water. In the twilight of his reign, Aemon walked the gardens where lemon trees perfumed the dusk. Children chased dragonflies among fountains carved with seven-sided stars. He saw in their laughter the realm he had labored to shape, one where fear did not rule hearts, where knowledge nourished as much as bread. Egg joined him, limping from an old jousting wound that pained him in damp weather. They spoke of nothing and everything, of how dragons might yet return in a century when men had learned restraint, of how Blackfire and Targaryen blood now mingled in courtly marriages, ending a century of schism, of whether lanterns inevitably burn low. Lanterns may dim, Aemon said, but each child carries a spark, and sparks kindle new flames. The realm is a library, brother, bound in living pages. All we have done is write a chapter. Egg smiled, weathered and soft. Then may the next chapter be written by steady hands. When the king died, he passed not upon the iron throne but in the solar of the Maester's tower. Quill in hand, parchment laid open for a treatise he never finished. His final breath escaped with a faint whistle, like a page turned too quickly. The realm mourned. Bells tolled from Old Town to White Harbor. Yet there was no scrambling for succession, no knives unsheathed in bedchamber shadows. Aemon's only daughter, Princess Naerys, beloved of both commons and lords, took the crown amid unanimous acclamation. Egg, frail yet unbowed, placed it upon her brow. As Naerys knelt before her uncle, she whispered, "I will keep the lantern lit." Egg, tears bright, replied, "And may you guard its flame wisely, for its light is the realm's hope." Thus ended the reign of Aemon the Lantern, first of his name, whose crown weighed less upon his head than his maester's chain had upon his neck, but whose legacy burned far brighter. The wind coming off Blackwater Bay carried a hint of brine and alder smoke as the sun bled behind the city's roofs, and the great bells of Baelor's September tolled steady and low, 9 peals for a king departed. Black banners streaked with 7-pointed stars snapped above the spires. Every window in the capital held a candle, so that King's Landing glittered like a field of fallen constellations. In the Red Keep's Godswood, Queen Naerys knelt alone beside the still pool. Black silk billowed around her like ink unfurling through water as she traced the reflection of the first star to pierce the dusk. It trembled whenever her fingers brushed the mirrored surface, and each tremor felt like a question. How long could one woman cradle a realm in her palms before the answering tremor shattered bone? She whispered the promise she had given her father, "I will keep the lantern lit," and rose to face the waiting night. A procession of 7,000 small folk escorted the king's body to the dragon pit, where the last of the dragonfire would lick his beer. The silent sisters had bound him in plain white linen, but Naerys ordered that his maester's chain lie across his breast, a circle unbroken even in death. When they slid the bier into the yawning forge mouth of the old pit, sparks stuttered up the vault like fireflies startled from sleep. Naerys did not weep. Her tears were stored in a hidden cistern, and that reservoir must remain full for storms to come. Ser Duncan the Tall, silver now as winter wheat, stood sentinel until the flames sighed to cold ash. He gathered a fistful and handed it to the queen in a leather vial. "Carry him with you," he said, voice roughened by age and smoke. She clutched the warm dust. It felt absurd that an entire life, her father's laughter, his gentleness, the vast palace of his mind, could weigh no more than a swallow of spice. Yet its warmth pulsed through the leather like a living thing. That night Naerys summoned her council to the library her father had loved. Between towering shelves she seated Lord Arryn, Lady Olenna Tyrell, Master of Coin Bourse Heatherspoon, Grand Maester Norrin, and, at her right hand, Prince Consort Aegon V, still called Egg by those bold enough to remember. Rena Blackfire, now 23 and luminous, slipped in quietly, parchment tucked beneath one slender arm. Naerys spoke without preamble. "My father's reign stood on 3 pillars: mercy, knowledge, and the binding of oaths stronger than steel. We shall add a 4th, vigilance." She unrolled a map pricked with black crescent sigils along the summer sea. "Piracy bleeds us white. The stepstones need order. The Reach's granaries can't feed villages if their ships founder on corsair hooks." Lord Arryn's beard bristled. "A fleet costs silver our coffers lack." "Then we mint new coin," Lady Olenna said, dry as parchment. "Cut the gold content by a grain. No small folk will notice, and lords will grumble only until their purses grow fat." "Debase the coinage?" Arryn sniffed. "A short rope for a long drop." Naerys raised a hand. "No deba cement." "We innovate." Rena stepped forward and spread her parchment. Schematics for a rotary press powered by water wheels, capable of striking coin 20 times faster than hand hammers. We shift from gold to brass for petty trade, Naerys said. Reserve gold dragons for major levies and crown debts. Brass flows from Lannisport mines and used for decades. Tybalt Lannister's heir, Ser Lymond, sat silent, eyes flaring with calculations. His family could profit handsomely, and profit softened the sharpest pride. The plan carried. Weeks later, Egg rode the King's Road with 2 of the new brass half-dragons jingling in his purse. He preferred to test reform on his own skin, an old habit from trudging beside Dunk beneath scorching Dornish suns. At inns he asked innkeeps whether the coin rang true on the boards. A stout woman in sow's horn tapped one half-dragon with a spoon, listening for false tin. The ring came pure and she shrugged. If it buys oats, it's good as gold. Yet further north, at the Trident of the Green Fork, Egg found a gaggle of sellswords pestering a ferryman, demanding gold for passage. When the old man offered brass instead, blades flashed. Egg seldom reached for titles, but that morning he unsheathed the Valyrian dagger Naerys had gifted him. Shepherd's Mercy, forged of pale, rippled steel, caught dawnlight like river water. "Does coin's color matter once it fills your bellies?" he asked. The sellswords judged the keen edge and stepped aside. Egg paid 3 brass half-dragons for the ferryman's silence and rode on. Back in the capital, Naerys established the Lantern School, tuition-free, staffed by maesters who rotated 6-month posts to prevent ossified thinking. Children of cobblers sat beside the sons of petty knights, scratching glyphs across slate. A visiting Lycene envoy scoffed that literacy would breed discontent among the lowborn. Naerys replied, "Ignorance breeds sharper rebellions. Letters prove cheaper than swords." 5 years on, crime in Flea Bottom dropped by 1/3 as gutter boys found parchment more profitable than pickpockets' knives. But lanterns draw moths and predators alike. Across the narrow sea, the Triarchy resurrected under exiles who claimed kinship with ancient Volantine tiger princes. They sold passage for pirates through the disputed lands, taxing raiders to fund a navy of sleek caravel dramans. When they seized 4 Northman merchant cogs off the arbor, Naerys' patience frayed. She summoned her war council beneath painted constellations in the Red Keep's starry hall. Egg argued for swift reprisal, torch the corsair nests, line the masts with flayed captains. Grand Maester Norrin advocated blockade and diplomacy. The Queen listened and then proposed something stranger, an alliance with bravos. The Iron Bank had ever watched the crown like a jeweler appraising counterfeit gems. Yet Aemon's gentle rule had impressed even that flint-eyed Leviathan. Naerys suggested a compact. Bravos would finance a joint anti-piracy fleet in return for sharply reduced interest on the Crown's remaining debt and preferential docking rights at King's Landing's expanded piers. Bravos hungered to curb Volantis' ascendancy. The offer gleamed. Negotiations spanned winter. By spring, the Sea Lantern fleet slid into the bay. 12 Braavosi galleys with oars striped purple and teal alongside 8 Westerosi warships refitted with Scorpion ballistae capable of loosing barbed siege corals. Ser Lymond Lannister commanded the Westerosi squadron. A Braavosi captain of captains, Ravos Tormo, led the rest. Sister ships tied by pact rather than blood. When the fleet struck the pirate haven of Black Cudgel Cay, storm clouds hurled sleet across rotting palisades. Ballistae sang, corals punching through hull ribs. Lannister brass-trimmed helms glimmered beside Braavosi moon masks as Marines swarmed the piers. Egg, silver hair flying beneath a plain iron cap, fought at the vanguard. He felled a corsair chief with Shepherd's Mercy, then hauled the pirate's ledger from a burning shack. Inside, a list of buyers, lists, mere, even spicemongers from Karth. Ravos Tormo torched the ledgers in disgust. Egg stayed his hand. "Leave proof," he said. "We fight lies with truth." The pages, charred and fragile, journeyed back to King's Landing under wax seals. Naerys convened tribunals. Merchants named in the ledgers paid triple reparations or forfeited ships. The coffers swelled enough to fund new breakwaters along White Harbor, a boon that thawed Lord Stark's northern reserve. Yet war bore its own cost. Bronze dragons circulated faster than minties could stamp them. Inflation whispered in silk cellar booths. Candles cost 2 coppers rather than 1. Naerys convened her economists, an ugly word in Westeros but accurate, and unveiled a sliding tax that rose on speculative trade and fell on essential grains. The Guild of Coin Counters balked until Rena Blackfyre presented data scribbled in a cipher of her own design. It showed that unchecked speculation had spiked bread prices by 40%, starving dockhands. The guild relented when Naerys promised interest subsidies on grain storehouses. Even parasites preferred hosts alive. While coin and fleet turned, fissures in stone whispered anew. In the cavernous belly of the dragon pit, the sealed cracks began to sweat. Mason-gray sheets darkened each dawn. The memory of Aemon's vigil haunted Naerys. She ventured down with Rena, carrying only lanterns. The air thrummed, a deep pulse echo she felt in her molars. Rena pressed a hand to the moist wall. "It wants," she said, eyes wide with something between dread and exultation. A fortnight later, Grand Maester Norrin shuffled into the small council with an obsidian egg no larger than a cat, veins of scarlet glowing faintly beneath its glassy shell. "Found in rubble beneath the rat pit," he croaked. Word spread like wildfire. Some maesters denounced it as a hoax. Others whispered dragonseed returning to fertile ground. Naerys pledged study, not hatching. She ordered the egg encased in lead to douse any latent heat. Still, dreams crept through court. A squire awoke screaming of wings bigger than ships. A washerwoman birthed a babe with a membranous crest along his spine. Midwives swore and drowned it in terror. Lady Olenna, ever flint-witted, cornered the queen in the Maiden Vault Gardens. "Kill the egg," she hissed, roses brushing her sleeves like eager ears. A candle in a library is one matter. A bonfire in a thatch cottage is another. Burn it, grind the shards, salt the soil. Yet Rena Blackfyre begged clemency for the relic, seeing in it both heritage and warning. Blood called to blood. Naerys held counsel beneath silent skulls once more. Dunk's creased brow folded like beaten leather. Egg said nothing, gaze fixed on the Iron Throne's twisted silhouette. At last Naerys spoke. Knowledge untasted turns to poison. She decreed a secret enclave of scholars, selected from Citadel, Volantine pyromancers, and even a shy glass candle reader from Karth, would investigate the egg far from the city, on remote driftmark where the sea could swallow calamity. Lord Corran Valerion, lean as an oar and proud of old Valyrian blood, accepted the charge. Driftmark's castle high tide shut its gates. Ravens no longer flew over its ramparts. Rumors sprouted that pale lights danced above the waves at midnight, that fishermen hauled up charred fish with scales fused like black glass. No proof reached the Red Keep, only stories. 3 winters deep into Naerys' reign, Egg felt the hinge of age grind his knees. Yet he saddled his horse when a raven from Ravos Tormo reported Triarchy remnants massing again near Tyrosh. Dunk urged him to leave the sword to younger men, but old debts itch like phantom scars. Egg rode, Duncan lumbering beside him, to Tarth's sapphire shores where the Sea Lantern fleet anchored. The battle-off Evenfall Hall unfurled beneath a sky churning with violet storm cells. A waterspout danced between galleys clawing each other's ribs with boarding Pike's Egg led the counterboarding of the saffron beast. But a crossbow bolt bit through his mail into the meat of his thigh. Duncan's roar cut through thunder. He carved space enough to haul Egg back across sagging planks. They won. The saffron beast scuttled, its captain shackled, but victory tasted of copper. Egg's wound festered. Fever carried him back to King's Landing, where Naerys watched sickness gnaw the man who had been her father's unbreakable shield. Grand Maester Norrin leeched, poulticed, prayed. Egg lingered between worlds, visions sliding beneath his eyelids like river reeds. One dusk he woke lucid. Naerys sat bedside, hair unbraided, crown forgotten. Egg lifted a trembling hand to her cheek. "Little niece," he whispered, "do not chase dragons. Lanterns burn searing bright, but wildfire brighter still, and without mercy." She clasped his fingers until they stilled. Egg, fifth of his name who never wore the crown, passed into song. His funeral barge drifted down the Blackwater, a bier of blue winter roses at his head. Ser Duncan set it aflame with an arrow loosed from the mud gate, tears streaking soot down his face. The blaze painted the river molten. Small folk lined the banks, bowing heads. Naerys scattered her father's ash vial upon the same water, dust mingling with flames. A circle closed. With Egg gone, the realm discovered how much of its quiet balance had hung on his roaming presence. Bandits emboldened. Gulltown's young lordling tested toll hikes. The Lannister heir grew fractious, muttering that brass debased noble commerce. Naerys convened her council but felt the space egg had filled like a missing rib. Into that void stepped Rena Blackfire. She had studied coin flows, grain charts, and diplomatic ledgers at the Queen's side for a decade. Now she proposed a daring answer to unrest. A great fair of the Seven Kingdoms, hosted on the King's Road's broad plain south of Harrenhal. Their craftsmen, traders, and sellsword companies could barter under crown-set ceilings. Grievances dissolved in profit. Give them a market larger than their grudges, she said. The plan risked chaos. Half the realm on one field? Yet memories of Aemon's first great council resounded through time. Naerys agreed. She dispatched heralds bearing bright pennants. Green for trade, gold for artisans, crimson for tourney. The fair blossomed like a many-petaled lily. Sworn shields polished battered helms for justs while Dothraki tattersellers hawked whip-cured leathers. Northman mead mingled with arbor reds. In a vast canvas pavilion, Naerys unveiled the realm's first printed codices, her father's Codex Aemonis, the ink still fragrant. She sold them at cost, pages bound in supple goat. 100 lords carried them home as fashionable curiosities. 1,000 septons found sermons in their margins. But every festival breeds its thief. Beneath laughter and lute-strum, agitators preached dragon return. They bore sketches of the driftmark egg, claiming it had cracked. Crowd whispers thickened like flies around honey. 2 sellsword companies brawled. Steel flashed. 3 men died. The fair teetered toward riot until Ser Duncan rode through the main thoroughfare bareheaded, scars silver against sundark skin. He raised Egg's woolcap, the plain one the prince had worn across half the world. This realm is Egg's egg, Duncan thundered, voice echoing over tents. It hatches peace if we warm it together. The image, absurd, gentle, bled fury from the crowd. Fights dissolved into embarrassed silence. Duncan dismounted and helped a fallen sellsword bind his own cut. The riot died before it lived. When the fair closed, coffers overflowed. Bonds between houses freshly forged by trade rang true as hammered steel. Yet Naerys pondered the rumors. She sent a fast sloop to Driftmark. The courier returned with a sealed chest. Inside lay the lead-clad egg, weeping heat that blistered the wood. A letter from Lord Valerion accompanied it. Your Grace, the thing changes. It is neither stone nor ember but something between. I fear to study it further upon Driftmark. The sea is vast, aye, but dragons may ride wind as water. Decide its fate swiftly before it decides ours. Blood thrummed in Naerys' ears as she touched the warm casing. Knowledge unt. Ass turns to poison, but tasting might scorch beyond ashes. She convened the Lantern Circle, as scholars called themselves now. Arguments raged, destroy, bury, embrace. Finally Rena, eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights, offered a compromise as radical as it was simple. Gift the egg to Bravos, whose Archon treasured wonders yet feared fire. Remove temptation from Westeros, bind Bravos tighter, and let the Sea Lords cage what the land could not. Lord Aaron balked. Selling birthright, Lady Olenna mused that Bravos would leverage it like a dagger at their throat. Norrin wheezed that the Citadel would revolt. And Duncan, ever blunt, asked what warrior lops off his sword hand then expects to win the next duel. Naerys watched torches gutter along the library walls, each flame a fragile truth. She thought of her father pacing between shelves, murmuring that wisdom meant weighing impossible choices and choosing the burden one could bear. At dawn she rose. We will not barter dragons for coin nor burn unknown life. We will hide it where none may reach, yet under eyes that never close. She named a new order, the Cindersworn, an oath band of maesters, knights, and septons bound to guard the egg in a secret vault beneath the Isle of Faces, where green men whispered of ancient weirwoods that saw without seeing. The order would answer only to the crown and to the gods they served. Duncan accepted command despite aching joints. Rena swore quill and blade alike. Young Ser Rabar Royce pledged Vale's stone honor to the task. Rumors flew, but no proof followed. Some claimed the queen had hatched a dragon and flown it to the moon. Others said the egg was hollow glass. Only the Cinder-sworn knew truth, and their tongues lay behind oaths stronger than iron. Years turned. The lanterns Naerys tended burned steady. The sea lantern fleet patrolled deep as old Valyria's ruined spires. Brass dragons jangled from Dorne to the Wall. Literacy climbed until street urchins debated Codex Aemonis beside gutter fires. Yet destiny seldom slumbers forever. A harsh winter clenched the realm in its jaw. Frost killed half the Reach's early bloom. The north stockpiles dwindled despite Aemon's old roads. Naerys dispatched grain caravans, but snow choked passes faster than oxen could plod. Desperation breeds old faiths. In hill villages near Cracklaw Point, men built wooden dragons and prayed for fire to melt ice. And in the Red Keep's lowest crypt, a lacquered chest pulsed with warmth though no hearth burned nearby. One midnight Rena Blackfire awoke to find her pillow smoldering. In its ashes lay a shard of blackened scale no wider than a thumbnail, edges glowing ember red. She wrapped it in damp linen and raced to the queen's solar. Naerys, bleary-eyed, unwrapped the relic. The heat did not blind, did not scorch, merely radiated bone-deep promise. They gazed at each other, the unspoken question growing wings. Could one dragon's breath banish winter famine? Or would its fire consume more than the cold ever could? Spring arrived late, shy as a fawn. Snow melted. Green pushed through gray. Grain stocks stabilized. The shard cooled, becoming nothing more than a dull sliver of obsidian. Life, or the hint of it, withdrew. Naerys locked the shard beside the leaden egg on the Isle of Faces, adding another lantern to her growing constellation of secrets. Some nights she wondered if her father watched through time. Proud or sorrowful, she could not know. She knelt before the weirwood in the godswood, breathed the scent of sap and moonlit moss, and listened. Leaves rustled like distant pages turning. When Naerys lay old and still, her once ebony hair silver as starlight, the small folk carried bronze lamps shaped like open books to her funeral. They lined the King's Road, lamps swaying in thousands toward the horizon. Fires not of conquest, but of thought. In the September of Baelor, the High Septon intoned that Queen Naerys Lanternbearer had written the longest era of peace since the conquest. Yet beyond the holy drone, wind rattled shutters as though impatient for new stories. Princess Alice, Naerys' granddaughter, placed the brass half-dragon her great-uncle Egg had once given a ferryman upon the queen's folded hands. The coin's edges were worn smooth. Faces of dragon and seven-pointed star blurred together, indistinct, inseparable. Outside, dusk's first star winked above the Red Keep. Far to the north, on an island where green men sang voiceless songs, a vault heartbeat quickened by one pulse. Lanterns burn, ashes cool, eggs wait. A hush deeper than any winter silence settled over the Isle of Faces as dawn unfurled thin pink ribbons across the god-sized mirror surface. Beneath the ancient weirwoods, whose pallid limbs twisted heavenward like supplicants caught midway through a prayer, the Cinder-sworn stood in an uneven circle. Splashes of russet leaf litter clung to their dark cloaks. Dew glazed their mail. Ser Duncan the Tall, stoop-shouldered now but still a tower among men, held a forked bronze staff tipped with a lantern whose glass panes were etched with 7 interlocking stars. At its heart glimmered a coal the size of a sparrow's egg, cut from the same fire gem veins as the shard sealed in the distant dragon pit catacombs generations ago. He struck the staff but to earth, and the coil of murmured vows rose with the mist. They had come not to pray but to listen, for the heartbeat had grown unmistakable. At first it was felt only at the edge of hearing, a bass thrum that quivered the cups on their breakfast trays. Then it grew into a pulse that rattled books upon driftwood shelves. Now, this very morning, It drove tremors through the flagstones of the vault below the great heart tree's roots, scattering chalk dust from the rune-carved walls. Rena Blackfire, hair caught in a single jet braid like a line of ink across a scroll, pressed her palm to the cool bark. Her violet eyes flashed with facets of fear and wonder. "It gains strength each moonrise," she whispered, voice papery after nights without sleep. "Soon no lead can quench it." Duncan answered with a grunt and shifted weight from his left knee, which ached like ice in every joint. "Then we pray knowledge outpaces fire," he said. "Or we pray to die well." Deep underfoot, the pulse repeated, slow, deliberate, vast, as though some giant swimmer beneath the world kicked once against the seabed, then waited. Queen Naerys Lanternbearer had been gone 3 winters. Her brass half-dragon clutched forever in folded hands within a marble sarcophagus below the September of Baelor. Her granddaughter Alice Aemon Targaryen wore the crown now, though not all agreed she was ready. She was 22, keen of eye and tongue but less seasoned than her grandmother had been on accession. Silk spinners at court wound stories of her dancing barefoot under moonlight in the Maidenvault Gardens, hair streaming like a silver comet, laughter sharp as shattered crystal. Admirers swore she could recite high Valyrian epics from memory. Detractors muttered that she practiced fire rites learned from shadowbinders. From the Whispering Wood to the Dornish marches, the realm watched her with a collective breath held halfway between admiration and alarm. The first test came on a spring morning brittle with frost. A raven winged in from Maidenpool bearing news that the Weeping Plague, a bloody flux long thought confined to the swamps of Sithorios, had erupted in the free city of Qohor. Within a fortnight, a Lysine carrack limped into Blackwater Bay with half its crew dead and the other half coughing crimson. The gold cloaks tried to deny the vessel entry, but smugglers rowed ashore under fog and vanished into the maze, infecting dockworkers and fishmongers alike. By the time healers caught wind, fever fires danced in a dozen wards of King's Landing. Panic leapt faster than any germ. Queen Alice seized the reins. She recalled the grain reserve edicts of Aemon, the Lantern and Naerys sliding tax reforms. Then she grafted harsher measures atop them. City gates shuttered. Market squares emptied. Plague wards sprouted beside the Blackwater like field tents in wartime. The Sea Lantern fleet cruised the mouth of the river, scuttling any ship that dared approach without quarantine banners. Some called her tyrant, yet the fever's advance slowed to a crawl, then halted entirely on the 14th day. Outside the capital, Grand Maester Karen sent ravens soaked in vinegar and wax-sealed with sulfur to every holdfast, prescribing willowbark drafts and limewash cleansing for floors. Tales of entire villages whitewashed from eaves to privies spread through the countryside. By midsummer, plague embers had guttered out. The dead in King's Landing numbered fewer than 700, a miracle by any reckoning. Crowds gathered beneath the Tower of the Hand, cheering Queen Alice's balcony appearances. But accolades birthed jealousy. In the alehouses of Lannisport, merchants groused that quarantine had strangled their export coffers. In the Vale, Lord Donal Arryn's uncle whispered that no woman so young could have devised such methods alone. Surely shadowy counselors guided her, perhaps even witches of the Red Faith. Word of the heartbeat on the Isle of Faces filtered through those same grapevines, twisted and fermented until folk claimed a living dragon's yolk pulsed there, ready to hatch under a Targaryen sorceress's hand. Alice summoned her small council. Rena Blackfire arrived silently from the Isle, cloak smelling of pine resin and distant smoke. Her report was spare. The egg's outer shell remained whole, yet heat now seeped through the lead, heat enough to blister oak boards 2 hands away. "Soon," she said. "Wood alone will ignite." Duncan concurred, though his voice faltered when he spoke of tremors strong enough to bend iron candle stands. Princess Alice listened, fingertips steepled, purple eyes unreadable. "If it breaks," asked Harwin Beesbury, master of coin, "can we hope to chain it?" "The first dragons were never chained," said Duncan, "only bonded. And bonds," Rena added, "are forged faster than chains can be hammered, but break as swiftly." Karen, snowy eyebrows bristling like frost-rimmed brushes, advised immediate burial of the egg under 100 weight of stone in the ocean's deepest crevasse. "Let the drowned god keep it," he rasped. Ser Lyman Lannister, now Lord of Casterly Rock after his father's heartstop, agreed loudly. Yet Lord Corran Valerion, still custodian of the Sea Lantern fleet, pointed out that no depth prevented krakens from dredging wrecks. "If our secrets rust underwater," he mused, "our foes may net them from below." Alice stood, cloak swirling as she moved to the map table. 10 generations ago, she began, Aegon the Conqueror rode Balerion to unite the realm by fire. My grandsire, Aemon the Lantern, saved it by kinder light. Perhaps both flames are needed in balance. She traced a finger along the god's eye. But no dragon may be loosed without a rider's vow to guide it. And no rider shall mount it unless this council is unified in will. Murmurs masked her silence. Duncan bowed. Rhaena's braid swayed forward like a quill poised above parchment. Corran muttered about untested alchemy, but when Alice's gaze pinned him, even he dipped his head. It was decided. Queen and counselors would voyage to the Isle to judge the egg's fate firsthand. The barge Wisdom's Mercy drifted across the god's eye under an autumn sun dulled by high Mara's tail clouds. Rowers wore ochre scarves soaked in sage to ward ague. Queen Alice sat at prow with Rhaena, studying the approaching grove of alabaster trunks mirrored perfectly in still water, as if upside-down forests grew in another world below. Ser Duncan supervised the offloading of iron-bound chests, wildfire extinguishers, sand barrels, net-weighted hessian sheets stitched with runes. At the dock, green men cloaked in mossy robes greeted them with silent bows. Their antler helms dripped beads of dew. Through a corridor of living trees, they led the party to the hidden stair. Twice as many steps down as led up, Duncan swore privately, a joke as old as his first tour of duty. The vault door was a slab of weirwood heartwood, carved with 7 interlocked lanterns whose candle flames formed a single breaking chain. Alice pressed her signet ring into a socket. Wood flowed like wax, granting entry. Heat slapped their faces. The leaden egg sat upon a plinth of black marble, chains of starlight steel circling it in 3 rings. Veins within its obsidian shell now pulsed molten orange, like lava glimpsed through cracks in a night-black crust. Each pulse matched the subterranean heartbeat, booming, patient, irresistible. Rhaena produced a rod of Nervashi glass studded with gemstones, a device for measuring dragonfire emissions charted in lost Valyrian treatises. The gems flared in sequence, tiny suns igniting across their facets. "Shell temperature has doubled in 15 days, she said. "Another fortnight and iron will soften near it." Corran dabbed sweat from wrinkled jowls. "Bury it," he croaked. But Alice walked closer until the hair on her arms curled with heat. She felt no fear, only an almost magnetic pull, ancestral memory stirring, beckoning. A hatchling's mind, half-formed, brushed hers. Hunger for air, flame, sky. For a heartbeat, she saw a black wing unfurl against starlight so vivid it stole her breath. She stepped back. "It lives," she whispered. Duncan's hand found her elbow. "Many living things are killers, Your Grace." She met his eyes. "Then we must learn its nature before it learns ours." A council within the council convened in a side chamber. Rhaena, Duncan, Corran, and Septon Taller, whose calm faith had consoled plague wards last year. Taller argued the egg was a gift from the Seven, proof of divinity's plan. Corran retorted that gods also send comets to burn worlds. Duncan's pragmatism anchored debate. Secure it or see it stolen. Corran suggested moving the egg again, deeper underground. Rhaena, twining her braid like a rosary, spoke at last. "We are keepers, not wardens. If we cage life until it chokes, we have authored a living torture. If we unleash it unready, we kindle apocalypse. We must choose a third path, partnership." Corran snorted. "You propose bonding a rider? In secret? With whose blessing?" Rhaena folded parchment upon her lap. "The Queen's, and the realm's, once success is proven." "What candidate?" asked Duncan. Rhaena looked at Alice through the open door where heat rippled like summer haze. "There is only one whose blood and spirit both echo inside that shell." Silence poured like oil over the chamber. Outside, the heartbeat quickened, double-thumped, then stilled again. Preparations spanned the waning year. At night inside the Red Keep, Alice studied scrolls scribed by Silverwing's last riders, by Rhaenys and Visenya, by Baela Targaryen who had hatched Moondancer from her bedside brazier. She memorized the old Valyrian lullabies that soothed dragons, though some lines were lost, replaced by phonetic guesses. Rhaena drilled her in meditation exercises taught by Shadowbinders of Aes-High, a paradox of stillness amid infernal heat. Ser Duncan oversaw forging of a saddle light as horn but strong as boiled leather, lined with steel rings for chain attachments. Smiths in Tumbleton crafted it under secrecy sealed by royal writ. Word nonetheless leaked. The Sable Circle, resurrected by resentful younger sons of houses Merryweather and Rowan, seized on rumor. They depicted a half-mad sorceress queen birthing hellfire to remake laws by flames. In gull-infested taverns at Old Town's docks, sailors drank black wine and sang The Dragon's Bride, a bawdy dirge wherein a maiden wed an egg only to be devoured on her wedding night. Each retelling spread west like sparks on dry wheat. In the Vale, Lord Donnell Arryn's failing health left management to his wife, Lady Alice Carinth, who aligned with pious lords fearing dragon idol worship. They called a council at the Eyrie but found no consensus. Many remembered Plague's survival ode to Queen Alice. Gratitude and fear balanced precariously. The tinder awaited a spark. It came when a Myrish spy seized outside Maidenpool confessed under Truth Milk Droplet that Bravos had placed a bounty on Dragonseed, alive or shattered. Free City gold glittered in every daggerman's eyes. The Queen's retainers began falling to poisoned quills. Secret arrowheads glazed in basilisk blood. Twice assassins penetrated the Red Keep's walls only to vanish mysteriously beneath its passages. Ser Duncan later admitted he fed them to the black cells, a mercy compared to public flaying. Amid growing threat, Alice advanced the hatching date. On a frost-rimmed evening in ninth moon, a sliver moon hung like a hook over the god's eye. Cinder Sworn ringed the vault, chants echoing. Rhaena chalked protective circles in Valyrian glyphs around the egg, each line blazing foxfire blue as the chalk touched floor. Alice approached in a robe sewn of unbleached silk, no metal, lest it melt to skin, and knelt within the innermost ring. She began singing, Slow Low, a lullaby older than old Valyria, taught by Rhaena's cracked records, its syllables sliding like molten glass. She could feel the language shaping flame itself. The egg responded, veins brightening, pulse surging. Lead blistered away in flakes. The shell's surface bulged, cracked. Heat slammed outward. Even across the chamber Duncan staggered. Sweat dappled his mail. With a sound like a world's crust splitting, the egg cracked down one flank. A triangle of shell fell free, and superheated steam whooshed out, hissing across runes that drank light like parched mouths. Inside crouched a creature the size of a large mastiff, wings wet and folded, scales glossy ebony striped by faint violet. Eyes opened, pupils vertical slits rimmed in molten copper. Fixed on Alice, nostrils flaring. She extended one bare hand. Her heart hammered so fiercely she felt ribs shiver. The hatchling sniffed, head cocked, then pressed its snout to her palm. Skin sizzled, yet she did not flinch. Pain was a bell tolling far away. A warmth deeper than flesh pooled through her arm. Recognition. In that exhale of eternity, the bond formed. Night flame, she whispered. The dragon blinked and chirruped, tiny sparks puffing from nostrils. Rhaena exhaled a prayer. Duncan sagged against the wall. Karen half wept, half laughed. Alice rose, cradling the slick hatchling against her chest, though needle-sharp claws pricked her skin. I am yours, she said in high Valyrian, and you are mine. Thus dragons returned. Night flame grew with disconcerting speed. Within 10 days it could leap upon parapets and spread wings 12 feet tip to tip. Goat herds along Maidenpool's marshes reported stolen kids flayed by scorching. Alice dispatched Crown Gold to repay double, though some claimed the incident staged by those who would profit from compensation. Word of the dragon reached Bravos, Volantis, and shadowed jungles beyond. The free cities scrambled to reevaluate alliances. The Iron Bank froze interest rates, anxious to appear indispensable. The Triarchy's last admirals swore vengeance, though their fleets rotted at anchor. Meanwhile, conspirators at home thrived. The Sable Circle drafted a manifesto, the Emberbane Decree, alleging the Queen intended to burn dissenting lords. They smuggled copies into the Reach. Students at the Citadel debated its points, some impressed, others scandalized. Maesters argued over whether Targaryen supremacy by flame contradicted the Lantern doctrine of learned mercy. Grand Maester Karen, once cautious ally, found himself bombarded by Ravenborn petitions demand
Engineer clarification.
When he refused to denounce the Queen, a faction of Archmaesters declared him compromised by draconic glamour. Karen responded by shuttering Citadel Ravenry to all but royal writ, inciting fury among information-hungry lords. Tension crystallized into steel at Bitterbridge. The Merryweather heir, Ser Ralph, ambushed a crown patrol escorting Night Flame's feed caravan. He unleashed 7 scorpions rigged on hay wagons, bolts tipped with dragonglass rumored to pierce enchantments. Night Flame, still half-grown, took 2 bolts in the flank before torching the attackers. Alice, who rode in the escort disguised as a guardsman, dismounted amid smoke to press burning hands to her dragon's scales, muttering broken lullabies. Night Flame's wounds closed before her eyes, flesh knitting with faint violet scars. Alice's palms blistered raw. The patrol limped home while raiders scattered into woods. Fear bloomed like mold on bread. House Merryweather disavowed Ralph, yet their garrison at Long Table sealed gates when crown envoys demanded his surrender. The Queen's council argued for siege. Alice hesitated, her grandsire's mercy ghosted her thoughts. She offered clemency if Ralph bent the knee and disarmed treasonous scorpions. The Sable Circle replied with Ralph's severed tongue nailed to the envoy's shield and a scroll proclaiming the tyrant witch queen must abdicate or die. Duncan spat. "Mercy meets madness, your grace." Rena agreed. Already their lies outpace truth. Show restraint and they will brand it weakness. Show strength and they will call it tyranny. The path splits but both forks loop to war. Alice gazed through tower windows where Night Flame wheeled above the city, black wings eclipsing sun for heartbeat-long moments. She recalled her grandmother's maxim, give them a market larger than their grudges. But markets could not appease men who craved crown blood. She gave the order. Muster host, ride south, end the rebellion swiftly before others kindled. The crown host marched beneath banners new wrought, a lantern enhallowed by 7 stars, framed by black wings. Some lords balked at that symbol, a dragon's shadow cast across enlightenment, but the design stirred small folk hearts, promising protection as fierce as knowledge. 20,000 foot, 8,000 horse, and the dragon Night Flame winging overhead like an omen of dusk at midday. Ralph's allies melted away. Long Table shut gates but did not sally. Siege towers rolled forward, but trebuchets stayed silent. Instead, Alice landed Night Flame upon outer walls, stones shivering under talons. She called for parley. Inside, Ralph's younger brother, Ser Ethan, wary and sweat-slick, peered from a murder hole. "Yield," Alice yelled, voice carrying over clanking armor. She pointed to the raised scorpion carts displayed before the gate, their bolts twisted by dragonfire. "This is treason's wage, but mercy yet stands." Ethan hesitated. Distant thunder approached, crown cavalry encircling. Night Flame spread wings, firelight glimmering between scaling plates. Within the keep, small folk wailed. Mothers clutched babes. Ethan threw keys from the battlements. The gates opened. Queen Alice dismounted amid kneeling men. Ralph Merryweather, fettered and gagged to quell blood loss from his missing tongue, confronted her in chains. His eyes blazed hatred, though tears streaked grime on his cheeks. Alice studied him. Then she sheathed her sword. "The realm needs law, not vengeance," she said, voice hushed but echoing through the courtyard. "Your crimes nearly killed my dragon, but more, they poisoned your people's trust. I strip you of name and privilege, Yet I spare your life that you might witness what service despite has wrought. She consigned him to 30 years hard labor building levees in Blackwater Bay's floodplain, levees he had undermined by rebellion. It was a punishment both humiliating and merciful. Some knights looked askance. They wanted heads. But the realm watched and small folk judged fairness. Rumors of the queen's leniency swept the riverlands like balm. The sable circle's momentum faltered. Yet a splinter group fled west, seeking succor from House Westerling, where disaffected Lannister vassals brewed plots. The realm's fracture lines began shifting southwest. In Bravos, Archon and Iron Bankers studied dispatches. A single dragon animated by moderate queenly policy posed manageable risk. But what of 5, 10? Better nip sprouting wings before they soared beyond control. Ships laden with sell-sail companies flew false banners, converging on hidden coves along the Stormland's coast. Gold chests stamped with the Titan's grim visage paid for loyalty from hedge knights, bandits, and mummers alike. At Storm's End, Lady Cassana Baratheon, descendant of Lionel the Laughing Storm, intercepted whispered plots but could not gauge scale. She penned ravens begging aid. Queen Alice sent Duncan and 4,000 spears by sea while she ferried Nightflame inland. Rena accompanied with a cadre of Lantern School medics to treat the wounded. They expected swift coastal skirmishes. They found invasion. 40 Myrish and Lysine war dramans hammered Storm's End's harbor, disembarking mercenary phalanxes clad in bronze mirror scales. Siege towers groaned toward walls built before the Undulls crossed. Duncan's fleet sailed into chaos, catapult stones crashing, sea of flame with jars of naphtha. He rallied deck spearmen under a hail of quarrels, landed at a rocky point north of the keep, and led a charge up wet cliffs. Meanwhile, night flames streaked overhead, shrieking lightning bright gouts of fire that turned tower roofs to bubbling slag. But for every ship burned, 2 anchored beyond Dragon Reach and rained bolts upward. On the second night, storm clouds gathered. Rain lashed between strobing thunder. Alice circled above Blackhaven's ridges, scanning silhouettes of enemy tents glowing like embers in dark valleys. She counted 30,000 mercenaries. Even Nightflame's fury could not scatter such host alone. She banked toward Storm's End, seeking Duncan's counsel, when a bolt, thicker than any scorpion projectile, clipped Nightflame's starboard wing. Engineered by Bravosi smiths, the bolt carried weight enough to crack ribs. Nightflame screeched, spiraled. Alice clung to harness rings. Leather bit her shoulders as they plummeted toward the sea, sleet slashing her eyes. At the last moment, Nightflame twisted, slammed Wave's tail first, and both vanished beneath storm-chewed water. Hours later, battered and half-drowned, Alice dragged herself onto a kelp-strewn spit a league north. Nightflame's wing membrane hung in tatters, but the dragon breathed, belly heaving with each swallow of brackish air. Alice collapsed, dimly aware of torchlights bobbing along cliffs. Enemy scouts. She woke to Rena's face above, rain dripping from the older woman's braid. Duncan's voice boomed orders behind, securing perimeter. Nightflame's wound had been stitched by lantern medics using wire forged of Valerian steel strands. The dragon slept fitfully, flanks smoking where cautery tool bit. "We cannot hold this coast," Duncan admitted once Alice could stand. "But we need not. A dragon's presence deters navies." He proposed scorched harbor tactics combined with Stormlander guerrillas harrying supply lines. Nightflame grounded, Alice would direct land strategy. Rena conjured a plan. Sabotage enemy food stores with ground poppy husks that induce vomiting. Less bloodshed, more demoralization. Over the next fortnight, the Queen moved like a shadow through piney ravines, directing small squads to fell trees across mountain passes, salt wells, and spread rumors of a second dragon bound for Dorne. The mercenary host, lacking cohesive leadership, frayed. Paymasters hanged a captain accused of stealing coin. His company deserted at dusk. Nightflame, wings still healing, prowled ridge crests spewing fire into empty sky, his roar echoing off sheer cliffs. Superstition gnawed enemy ranks. When word reached the Archon that wages tripled due to attrition, The patience of bravos snapped. They recalled fleets, leaving half the mercenaries stranded. Queen Alice offered safe conduct north in exchange for oath of fealty. Most accepted, binding themselves to rebuild smashed Stormlander villages. The invasion crumbled without pitched field battle. Storm's End endured. Lady Cassandra knelt before Alice in a courtyard strewn with burned crossbow bolts and ash. "Storms bow to dragons," she said. Alice answered, "Storms shape dragons too." They clasped forearms in mutual respect. The wider realm awoke to news. The queen who hatched dragons had repelled 2 invasions, crushed rebellion without wholesale slaughter, and still paid double reparations to goat herders. Her legend eclipsed fear. Even Citadel doubters published treatises praising her fusion of lantern doctrine with measured draconic deterrence. Yet legends breed higher stakes. In the deserts south of Karth, warlocks of the Unburnt Tower gathered around a smoldering pyre. They dreamt of harnessing Targaryen dragon lore to reclaim past glories. Oniric visions told them of a scaled beast still half-grown, ripe for capture. They fashioned glass spheres filled with shade of the evening potion, whispering spells that could bend minds. A caravan bearing these dream bombs set course west, disguised as spice traders. Back in Westeros, winter melted into brightest summer. Night Flame's wingspan doubled. Violet scars faded beneath new plates. The dragon accompanied Alice on a tour of the Reach, banking above golden wheat seas that once fed famine relief. At High Garden, Lady Olenna, entering her twilight but sharp as black pepper, presented the queen with a circlet of living roses, vines enchanted by Citadel alchemists to remain eternally in bloom. "Let your mercy flower even amid ashes," the matriarch intoned. Alice accepted, then teased, "Roses have thorns." Olenna winked, "Queen's deer have claws." During feast, Rena slipped away to the rookery to consult ravens. One parchment bore urgent sigils. Bravos agreed to renegotiate debt in exchange for shared dragonfire research. No transfer of beasts, only alchemical residues. The Queen's Council sniffed a trap. Still, diplomacy beckoned. Rena recommended sending emissaries laden with false leads to buy time. Night deepened. Moonlight pooled over Highgarden's ramparts. Alice wandered alone, soaking still air heavy with jasmine. She sensed, rather than heard, night flame stir in paddock below, wings rustling uneasy. An oily prickle traced her spine. Moments later, a scream from east wall split the calm. She raced along colonnade balconies, skirt whipping. Guards converged. A shadow reared against star-silver sky, an elongated shape gliding soundlessly, as if carved from absence itself. Warlocks from the Unburnt Tower had arrived sooner than any spymaster predicted, astride parchments of folded air, carpets dream-woven to defy gravity. They hurled glass orbs that burst into indigo mist, confounding senses. Soldiers staggered, eyes dilated. One orb struck paddock ground. Night Flame inhaled the vapor and keeled, pupils spinning. Alice dove down stairs 3 at a time. Warlocks chanted, weaving nets of spectral thread around the torpid dragon. She skidded across gravel, coughing as visions clawed her thoughts. Halls endless as void, whispers promising reunions with dead kin. She anchored herself in memory of her grandmother's lantern glow, of her grandsire's gentle voice. She shouted Night Flame's hatch song. The dragon twitched, netting loosened. A warlock lunged, brandishing crystal dagger. Rena appeared atop rampart, loosing an arrow into his chest. The chant faltered, spectral threads frayed. Alice reached Night Flame, pressed forehead to scorching scales, chanting lullaby in reverse. A melody said to close dreaming eyes. The dragon's pupils contracted. Fire rumbled in his gullet. He reared, jaws spraying blue-white flame that incinerated warlocks and nets alike. Carpet riders fled shrieking into night, shadows peeling like burned parchment scraps. Morning found the orchard east of Keep charred into glassy slag. Highgarden lords knelt to express undying loyalty. Small folk smeared ash over brows in awe. Still, the attack left scars. Alice's palms blistered anew, Night Flame's trust shaken. Rhaena's arrow arm sprained. Back at court, Karen warned of escalating occult threats. "Your dragon's blood sensed the wind," he told Alice. "Every necromancer, pyromancer, and hedge which will covet a scale." Alice raised Night Flame's shed plate, iridescent like oil on water. "If they covet scales," she countered, "let them buy them lawfully under terms that benefit the realm and keep eyes watchful." She decreed a dragon alchemy charter. Harvested scales sold to licensed alchemists under scrutiny, profits funding Lantern School's expansion. Transparency choked black markets. Some scorned commodification of myth, yet others applauded pragmatic wisdom. 5 years passed. Alice's reign flowered and hardened. Lantern Schools dotted every major holdfast, their towers topped with braziers lit by clean dragonglass burners. Brass coin gave way to alloy featuring tiny holes near rim, stringable currency for peasantry to carry more easily, an invention from Lys adopted at scale. The Codex Aemonis gained new chapters on fire diplomacy, penned collaboratively by Rhaena, Karen, and Queen Alice herself. Critics labeled them propaganda. Yet even in Old Town, novices memorized passages on ethical deterrence. Night Flame, grown thrice carriage length, roost on Dragonstone once again rebuilt, this time not as symbol of conquest but as research cloister overseen by the Cindersworn. Volantine envoys toured for mutual learning. Jaws slack at fused glass forges where smiths tempered steel with breath from Night Flame's nostrils precisely modulated by rune chimes. The Archon of Bravos, unimpressed, tried to ransom secrete debts. Alice responded by threatening to withdraw lantern accounts. Bravos blinked first. Yet no reign remains unchallenged. Across the shivering sea, on Ibben's frost-gnawed shores, a chieftain dreamed of forging empire by taming beasts of sky. He paid Leviathan ivory for scrolls describing Night Flame's hatching. In dark caverns, he fed walrus oil to eggs rumored found in a volcano's vent. The world braced itself, sensing storms on horizons. At home, the Sable Circle's last ember flickered at Castamere, where rains had ceased 2 centuries but Lannister descent sheltered them. Lord Lyman's son, Ser Martin, brooded over gold coffers half-emptied by crown taxes funding lantern expansions. He studied alchemical texts smuggled from Karth, seeking powder to kill dragons. He found substances that burned green and adhered to flesh, but tests on cattle merely annoyed Night Flame when he soared overhead during a crown progress. Alice's spies reported every purchase, yet she tolerated Martin, preferring watchfulness over martyrmaker reprisals. The dragon in sky redefined diplomacy. Kingdoms measured armies against wingspan. Yet the queen's greatest triumph remained invisible. She wove a social fabric wherein knowledge, not fear, underpinned loyalty. Lantern archives preserved treatises on crop rotation, seafaring star charts, cures for milk fever. Maesters once hoarded parchment. Now they printed leaflets for shepherds. The queen's standard, lantern and wings, hung in shepherds' huts, symbolizing hope not threat, but seeds of ambition germinate in every soil. Young knights who never tasted plague or invasion romanticized dragonfire knights errant. Poets sang of Night Flame's blaze forging new Valyria. Alice watched, heart heavy. She tasked Rhaena with drafting the Covenant of Scales, a declaration limiting dragons to guardianship roles, prohibiting use against civilian targets, requiring yearly council review. Lords signed reluctantly. The covenant became law, but laws scratch only parchment. Desire etches hearts deeper. On the 20th anniversary of Night Flame's birth, a great tourney assembled at Harrenhal, the same grounds where Maester Aemon had first been offered the crown a century before. Joust lists teemed with bright shields, pennants snapping. Night Flame circled high, a living fireworks display. In the third tilt, Ser Martin Lannister, helm crested with roaring lion, unseated Lord Daryon of the Marches with a lance tipped in black alloy. When Daryon's squire retrieved the broken shaft, he found slivers that smoked upon touch. Rhaena analyzed fragments. Wildfire glass fused with bloodstone. Dragon-killing material. Alarm rippled. Guards searched Martin's pavilion. They found no more, but suspicion stuck like burr. Alice confronted him privately. He defended curiosity, Knowledge is your creed, my queen. Should not enemies be studied? She sensed half-truths, yet evidence lacked for arrest. She released him under oath to abide by the covenant. That night, a masked feast filled lamps across Harrenhal's absurdly vast hall. Revelers wore painted visages. Dragons, wolves, krakens. Alice donned a plain lantern mask, wandering incognito. She overheard snippets. Praise, envy, resentment. One drunk Reach Knight whispered that dragons should rule Essos next. Another spat that Candle Queen would drown them all in ink. The realm stood on razor's edge between awe and exhaustion. Past midnight, pillars groaned. A tremor shivered goblets. Guests murmured earthquake, but Alice knew that pulse. Heartbeats echoing under stone, though the Isle of Faces lay leagues distant. Night flame shrieked overhead. Scales glittered. The tremor built, crescendoed, then ceased. Alice met Rena's wide eyes across the hall. Something stirred beyond night flame, another egg awakening somewhere unknown. If dragons multiplied unsupervised, lantern balance would tip. They needed new Cindersworn, new covenants, broader wisdom. The queen lifted goblet, voice clear across vast rafters. To knowledge guided by mercy, guarded by strength. Glasses clinked. Somewhere deep, earth answered with faint reply, a promise or a warning. In years that followed, explorers sighted winged shadows off Ibn. At first fisherfolk claimed tricks of fog, but carcasses of charred narwhals washed up on white beaches, tusks cracked like cinders. Queen Alice dispatched sea lantern ships bearing envoys of peace. Knowledge for restraint. Meanwhile, the Covenant of Scales spread across Essos via traveling scholars. Some free city rulers signed, others mocked parchment leashes. Volantis, desperate to regain lost grandeur, secretly funded Ibonese beast tamers. Nightflame, largest since Merax's, preened atop Dragonstone yet looked east often, sniffing foreign winds. Alice sensed his yearning, understood it mirrored her own uneasy ambition, to shepherd a world bigger than one realm. She planned a conclave of nations at Dragonstone, a council to forge universal dragon law. Rena drafted invitations. Karen orchestrated logistic webs. Duncan, though near 90, vowed to guard gates one last time. On the eve of departure, a storm whipped Blackwater Bay. Lightning forked horizon. Night flame raised neck, throat glowing, as if conversing with thunder. In her solar, Alice finished letter to the Archon promising safe haven. She sealed it with wax shaped like lantern wings. As she pressed signet, she felt the ground lurch subtly, a single deep tremor. Outside, bells began to ring. An alarm from Dunk's old staff maybe, or from something older below. She strode to balcony. Night flame launched skyward, roaring. A sound neither triumph nor rage but urgent summons. The horizon to the east flared green-white, a pillar of fire erupting far beyond the stepstones. A comet? No. A dragon's birth cry, magnified by storms. Winds chong. Ed carrying scent of smoke older than men. Alice gripped stone rail. She thought of Maester Aemon declining a crown, of lanterns burning brighter than blades, of dragons caged by compassion yet still dragons. Histories will turn, spokes glowing now from new fire. She must ride its rim or be crushed beneath. And high above, night flame turned east, wings churning clouds, awaiting her command. The wind along Dragonstone's northern cliffs tasted of distant ash when Queen Alice brought the first foreign envoys ashore for the conclave of Scales. Over their heads night flame rode the updrafts in slow circles, an obsidian moon haloed by late summer light, each lazy beat of his wings sifting gulls from the sky like chaff. The foreigners tried not to stare, yet every tilted chin and swallowed breath betrayed awe. Alice herself felt the tremor of power ripple down through saddle straps fastened across the dragon's shoulders. It was a familiar hum now, akin to the pulse she once sensed in her own blood. Even so, its promise unnerved her. A single heartbeat astray might send the realm Australia into flame. She guided Night Flame to a basalt outcrop cleft like a giant's anvil, dismounted with the fluid grace of long practice, and descended a staircase carved by Valyrian masons whose names were dust. The envoys climbed after her, Braavos in sea-green silk, Volantis in tiger-striped bronze, Karth in a veil of hummingbird feathers, Ibn's shagfur emissary lumbering last, breath fogging the balmy air. Rena Blackfire and Ser Duncan the Tall flanked Alis at the landing, a united Targaryen spearhead of parchment, sword, and flame. Below, in the ancient throne room once stained by the soot of Balerian's nostrils, they had arranged 2 concentric rings of benches around a low obsidian table. The outer ring bore the guests' banners. The inner bore wooden lanterns whose 7-pointed panes flickered with steady paraffin flames. Alis took the one empty seat, the lantern throne, scraped smooth by centuries of kings exiled to the isle before her. She rested gloved hands on black glass, letting Night Flame's distant mind brush hers. The dragon's watchful calm anchored her heart. Braavos spoke first. The Archon's factor unfurled a scroll pleated with silver seals. He praised the queen's vision, yet warned of markets panicked by rumors of multiple hatchings. If dragon proliferation were not contained, lenders might raise interest beyond reach, even for thrones. Kartha's representative, eyes glittering behind his hummingbird mask, countered that the Age of Wonder was returning. Why should knowledge be caged by anxious bankers? Volantis nodded, stripes clinking. Ibn cleared his throat like ice cracking, muttering that fire would melt all ivory, so let the North be first to shape policy. Alis listened, weaving their words into silken threads in her mind. She had prepared proposals, voluntary scale tithe, cross-realm scholar exchanges, binding oaths against dragon eggs as instruments of siege. But the tide of talk eddied toward one topic: safety. All wanted assurance no pyre would blaze in their granaries, no hatchling swoop at their caravans. They wanted a guarantee stronger than parchment. Rena tapped a stylus on wood. "Safety," she said, soft as dust, yet every envoy stilled. "We can promise vigilance, can share breeding records if ever more eggs are found. But dragons are beings, not blades. They obey bonds, not chains, and bonds form only through trust." She let silence grow. On cue, from the slit windows came Night Flame's distant roar, stretched by wind into a long bass note. The envoys shifted. Then the Volantene bent forward. "Your dragon alone wards whole fleets. Suppose another kingdom hatches one without your lantern oaths. Suppose Ibn." He nodded to the fur-clad emissary. "Unleashes 6. The Ibonese bared filed teeth. Suppose Volantis feeds hatchling slaves as feed," he rumbled. Heat flared. Ser Duncan rose, silver hair pale against dark banners. "Suppose," he said, voice like oiled hinges. "We finish supposing and craft law." He strode to the table and drew a scroll sealed with the lantern crown. "The Covenant of Scales, ratified by our lords. Inscribe your marks, and the queen pledges the dragon you fear shall answer to a council of all who sign. Breach it and face Dragonfire and the armies of every signer." Braavos factor snorted.
Mutualdestruktion pects britva.
"Sometimes they keep it chained," Alis replied. Negotiations tangled like briar. Day stretched to dusk. Lanterns bristled as servants trimmed wicks. At last a compromise budded. A dragon ledger kept in Dragonstone under guard of woven orders. Cinder-sworn, Iron Bank auditors, and Templars of the many-faced god, whose neutrality even Braavos trusted. Each scale sale, each egg, each draconic incident recorded and sealed in duplicate. Any signer might inspect. Falsifying entries would summon joint sanction. The Tiger Priests balked. The Carthene demanded arcane trade secrets. But by star-rise signatures in crimson wax ringed the Covenant's margins, save one. The Ibonese emissary hesitated, sniffing at his ink like spoiled whale blubber. He muttered he lacked mandate. His king among snow would decide. Alis accepted the delay, though unease nipped her. Dragons had spread. She felt it in Night Flame's restless flights. Already fishermen spoke of a pale beast gliding above stepstone reefs. The ledger must become truth before rumors birthed armies. She dismissed the conclave to feast. Roasted squid and saffron rice, Dornish dates stuffed with cheese, arbor gold pouring like molten sun, music of hammered dulcimers. Yet beneath the clamor Sid Duncan's eyes ranged for shadows. Rhaena's fingers traced unseen glyphs on table grain. Alice's thoughts soared beyond vaulted ceilings toward the thundercloud horizon. That same night, 300 leagues east, an Ibn Warlong ship named Moon Harpoon rocked in rough seas. Below deck, an egg larger than any cask pulsed red through slats, heat-warping tar. Clan shaman Rolf with no ears knelt, chanting guttural psalms, while walrus-fat lamps smoked. A hush-like breath held cloaked the cramped compartment until a hairline crack zigzagged across the shell, spilling crimson glow that painted tusks on every plank. The sailors exchanged wide stares. Their king had promised power enough to melt Westeros. Yet they had heard the whisper covenant of scales. Would the Lantern Queen allow their prize to live? The hatchling burst forth. Dun gray scales, eyes like frosted amber. It screeched, cough-spitting black sparks that singed Rolf's beard. The sailors reeled. In that echo, the beast's mind pressed there's raw hunger for flesh, for sky. No bond formed, only fear. The deck above trembled. Moon Harpoon never reached Ibn. At sunrise, a Myrish merchant sighted broken masts protruding from white-capped waves, slicked with oil. Something vast wheeled overhead once, twice, then dove beneath froth. Farther east still, in smoking caverns beneath Saffron Straits, twin eggs hatched under red priest incantations. Others cracked in Volantis black walls. Dragons no longer rare, now rumor congealed into fact. Reports flooded Dragonstone. Messengers, ravens, spymaster whispers. Ibn loses ship. Volantis stokes fires. Karth claims cloud serpents. Queen Alice convened an emergency circle. Faces drawn, they read scroll after scroll. Ser Duncan leaned on the table. Age hammered him, yet his eyes burned fierce. One dragon we guided, a pack we cannot. Bravosi Auditor Viler, newly installed, argued ledger revisions. Numbers multiply daily.
Enforcement impossible.
Rhaena countered. Law fails only if will falters. We must cement solidarity through action. What action? Asked the Carthene envoy. Invade every hatchery? Alice raised hand for quiet. We demonstrate that unbound dragons endanger all, even their keepers. Offer aid to train bonds. If aid refused, we isolate, embargo, contain. Her gaze scythed the hall. Let knowledge be carrot. Let united armies be stick. To prove point, she proposed the first joint patrol. Night Flame alongside a Bravosi war galley and Volantine scout, mapping hatch sightings, offering help. The notion shocked. Yet fear of being last to accept spurred assent. Save Volantis, which abstained, citing domestic sovereignty. Alice let them. Volantis' refusal served message. Non-signers risked suspicion. Night Flame soared next dawn. Queen on saddle, Rhaena behind. Over Sea of Dorne, they met the Bravosi galley quills oath-slicing emerald swells. For 3 days, they crisscrossed stepstone channels. Peasants on islets cheering as Dragon Shadow passed. They saw no rival WRMS, only charred goat pens, villagers burnt alive, melted fishing hooks. The Prince of Claws, the width of cart wheels, pocked limestone beaches. On day 4 they reached a rump of rock locals named Widow's Nail. Smoke streamed from a cave half-submerged by tide. Night Flame banked. Salt wind hissed in rigging below. Alice inhaled the scent. Brimstone laced with rotten fish. She guided him toward the cavern mouth. Inside, darkness pulsed with heartbeat glow. An adolescent dragon lay coiled, silver green, wings tattered, eyes milky. Around it littered gull corpses, whale calf bones, shattered crates bearing Ibonese runes. The creature wheezed. One foreclaw ended in a scythe of splintered bone. It had never bonded. Hunger drove it mad. Rhaena dismounted, whispering Valyrian lullabies. The beast hissed but lacked strength to strike. Alice felt sorrow root in chest. She had come as teacher. She now played executioner. Night Flame lowered head, nostrils flaring. The young dragon tried to stand, slipped on viscera, muled. Rhaena glanced back, tears like starlight. Alice tightened gloved fist, gave silent nod. One swift gout of flame, white-hot surgical burn, ended the creature's agony. Stone glowed orange. Stench of burnt scale filled cave. They left carrying a single unbroken fong. On the galley deck, Bravosi sailors crossed arms across chests in silent prayer. Alice declared the fong would rest in ledger archives. Caution to all hatchery dreamers. But word of mercy-killing traveled as wildfire. Volantis called it imperial butchery. Karth praised divine compassion. Ibn cursed lantern witch murder. Factions ossified. In King's Landing, lantern banners rustled above crowds swelling for annual harvest festival. Yet conversation roiled. Dragons breeding beyond borders. Ledger irrelevant. The Merryweather reconstruction levy finished. Levies held, but taxes lingered. Some small folk grumbled. Forgetting famines averted. Plagues halted. Lannister coins financed pamphlets mocking lantern elites. At court, Lord Perwyn Westerling presented petitions signed by 20 Western houses. Relieve us of dragon bonds. Let each realm police itself. Alice listened, then produced widow's nail fong. She laid it upon Dornish marble where lamplight revealed hairline cracks scorched through enamel. This is unbond flame starved of guidance, she said. Self-policing fails once sky becomes commons. The fong steamed as if memory of fire bled out. Lords whispered. Still, Westerling persisted. Why must West bear taxation for Eastern chaos? Alice replied, because smoke drifts on wind. She offered reduction of Lantern School's fee for houses funding anti-fire brigades. Coins talk. Some houses accepted. Yet under these debates, Martin Lannister's shadow lengthened. He traveled the Westerlands, preaching autonomy. Stockpiling alchemical powders gleaned from Carthene smugglers. In quiet gullies he tested them. Torpedoes that burned blue, nets impregnated with quicklime. Spy reports trickled to Rena. She urged preemptive arrest. Duncan argued proof lacked. Alice hesitated. Overreach might spawn martyr. Night Flame sensed tension. His flights grew restless. He snarled at shadows by Dragonstone Keep, scorched basalt ramparts until guard nerves frayed. Alice took him on dusk patrol above narrow sea to bleed anxiety. They circled above ships gliding like beetles under moonlit glass. From one deck, a volley of green bolts streaked upward, Volantine privateers ignoring treaties. Night Flame banked. Flames washed through rigging. Water hissed. Survivors clambered over rails screaming for mercy. Alice commanded a water drop, not slaughter. Night Flame obeyed, diving to slap tidal spray across burning deck until flames hissed out. The wreck limped. His captain signed articles next morning, swearing to ledger. Mercy cost as much as blood. Autumn bled into winter again when the god's eye froze at rim yet steamed near the aisle. Heat of the vault seeping skyward. The lead coffin that once held Night Flame's egg now lay molten slag. Runes etched in floor glowed faint even without torch. The second heartbeat under roots matched Night Flame's tempo sometimes, then raced ahead. Rena believed it responded to distant hatchings like wolf-to-wolf call. Duncan ordered fresh layers of star steel chain. Blacksmith's worried metal would warp. On a windless night, an explosion rocked Dragonstone. Night Flame's shriek shattered stained glass in Sept Chapel. Alice, roused from sleep, raced onto parapet to find the dragon hovering, tail lashing, head cocked east. Over sea, a bloom of orange lit horizon. Dragonfire, distant yet massive. Alice mounted. No time for heralds. They flew hours toward stepstones until sunrise unveiled a floating charnel. A Volantine flotilla ablaze, hulls seared open, sails melted into waxy shrouds. Above circled two dragons, one crimson, one dun, each half Night Flame's bulk yet deadly. Neither wore harness. One rider? None. They bickered midair, snapping at each other's necks, each claiming kill. Their screeches rattled ribs. Night Flame roared challenge. Younger beasts veered, assessed. Scent of bonded one tempered them. They retreated south, quarreling in flame-spat curses. No riders indeed, but wild cunning. Alice landed on a raft of driftwood bearing charred Volantene corpses. One still clutched a scroll case, bronze turned green. Inside parchment, orders to seize any foreign hatchlings for Volantis breeding pits. Night Flame Rumble growled. Alice felt his disgust echo her own. She convened her council at sea anchor.
Volantis vages clandestine var, rena so miset.
Yet their beasts escaped control. Duncan nodded grimly. Unridden dragons choose prey at whim. Alice realized ledger covenants. All fragile reeds once wildfire soared. They needed riders for every fledgling, else sky drown in chaos. But who would bond them? Valyrian blood once rare, now diluted across continents. She remembered lantern schools, children of every origin learning runes and tongues. Perhaps dragon sense might bloom in unexpected veins. She returned to capital and proclaimed the call of Ember. Any child between 10 and 16 may present at Dragonstone for empathy trials. No promise of bonding, only chance. Critics shrieked, inviting peasant to Dragonback? Yet hope glittered like coin. Families trekked from Frostfangs to Arbor. Rena devised tests. Approach wounded raven without startling. Trace Valyrian glyph with closed eyes. Hold heated stone until heartbeat sinks with rhythm carved inside. Out of 400 applicants first month, 2 showed spark. One, a summer islander girl named Jaya. Another, a bastard boy of Old Town docks, Loras Waters. Night Flame tolerated them stroking scales. Alice glimpsed the horizon of new order. Dragons diverse as realm, bonds forged by spirit not birth. News spread. Volantis brandished propaganda. Lantern Queen steals children. Bravos countered with pamphlets hailing merit. Stepstone pirates began kidnapping traveling hopefuls, ransoming them to Associ princes. The realm convulsed. In Westerlands, Martin Lannister declared Torchbearer decree. Any unsanctioned dragon within his borders would be slain. Any child leaving for Dragonstone regarded as hostage. He arrested 3 families en route, stoked resentment. Small folk turned on Lannister patrols. Hamlets burned. Alice dispatched peace envoy led by Septon Taller. Martin refused entry, citing sovereign rights. That night, Lannister powder warehouses exploded outside Riverrun. An accident or sabotage? 40 died. River ran green from unknown alchemical dye. Blame ricocheted. Threshold crossed. War did not begin with drums but whispers. Martin's agents poisoned Aqueduct Reservoir feeding Crownland's villages. Claiming dragons spread plague again. Lantern medics raced to neutralize. Casualties minor, yet terror sowed. In retaliation, unknown hands torched Lannister mine near Castamere. It collapsed, burying scores. Gold veins lost. Council urged decisive strike. Duncan proposed capturing Martin. Rena suggested cutting supply chains. Alice brooded. She loved mercy but saw flames creeping. She chose a path between display dragon might without massacre. At dawn, she mounted Night Flame and flew west. Over Lannisport Harbor she hovered, casting Eclipse shadow across merchant ships. Trumpets blared. Townsfolk fled. Alice unleashed a plume of fire into open sea, raising a wall of steam 100 feet high. No ship harmed, but message unmistakable. She shouted from saddle, voice amplified by bronze horn. Let gold buy books, not bombs. Stand down, give up powder, face tribunal. Dragonfire will not visit homes if swords fall now. For a moment harbor silent. Then a distant screech answered, different timbre. Over distant hills rose shape of dragon, smaller but agile. Martin had hatched his own. Copper scales, rider in crimson cloak. A hedge wizard rumored from Karth strapped to its back. They wheeled toward Night Flame flinging bright globes. Shadowglass bombs that burst into shards sprouting emerald flame. Lannisport gasped as Night Flame dodged. Waterlogged sails igniting from stray sparks. Combat world sky. Night Flame outmassed foe. Young Copper darted, slashing with talons tipped in green oil. Alice kept high, forcing enemy to climb. Thin air slowed Copper. Night Flame dove, tail smashing wing joint, crack like thunder. The smaller beast spiraled, rider screaming incantations that fizzled. They crashed beyond city walls, plowing golden barley. Alice landed cautiously. Copper lay snarling, wing broken. Rider, half-crushed, cursed lantern tyranny. Alice dismounted, approached amid smoke swirling from broken bombs. "Yield," she offered. He spat black blood. Night Flame stepped forward, heat shimmering. Copper hissed but lacked strength. Alice set blade to wizard staff, snapping runes. She ordered lantern medics to splint Coppa's wing, chain snout. Compassion amid conquest again. Martin's rebellion crumbled within week. He attempted flight, but Duncan's agents cornered him in vineyard cellar knee-deep in dragon powder barrels. He surrendered, expecting honorable captivity. Alice convened public tribunal at King's Landing. Evidence of poison, bombing, piracy laid bare. Crowd roared for death. The Queen studied Martin, remembered Ralph Merryweather's spared life-building levies. But this betrayal killed innocence knowingly. Mercy must have spine. She stripped Martin of title, exiled him across the narrow sea under escort to Bravos, where Iron Bank would oversee life bond of debt to families lost. His powders confiscated, research archived, then sealed. Lannister vassals swore fresh fealty in exchange for partial tax forgiveness. Yet scars remained. Copper Dragon, named Dustmaw by stable hands, refused bond. He would accept no rider but the fallen wizard. Alice debated release but feared unbound vengeance. She placed him under Cindersworn care on the Isle of Faces, hoping time and gentle voices might open his mind. The call of Ember expanded. Dozens now showed gift. Sometimes siblings both passed, other times only the quiet stable boy. Dragons hatched in Volantis, Karth, Ibn. Some bonded to cruel hearts, others perished. Sky filled with shifting alliances. Alice realized Ledger insufficient. They needed shared training grounds, code of aerial engagement, rescue accords. She proposed Dragon Moot, annual summit of riders, no matter king or Sellsword, to trade lore. Bravos offered neutral island. Volantis balked, but storms of reason pressed them. First Moot convened with 6 dragons roped to basalt pillars like restless gods. Night Flame, Dustmaw healer ridden by young Jaya now forging fragile bond. Twin Scarlet WRMS of Volantis bearing marble-masked twins. A sand-yellow drake from Dorne tethered to House Martell Bastard. And a pallid-winged serpent ridden by Ibn's Rolf reborn as Stormseer. Beard scorched half away yet spirit humbled. They spoke of thermal lift patterns, scorpion countertactics, safe altitudes for city overflight. Disputes flared. Night Flame's roar settled some. At dusk they etched runic pact upon pillar, sky code. Back in Westeros, lantern schools wove dragon ethics into curriculum. Farmers petitioned for ashen-rich soil where dragons exhaled. Smiths sought scale slivers for light yet strong armor. Economy bent. Culture too. Ballads of Copper Dustmaw's redemption soared in taverns. Years edged forward. Alice flecked silver. Night Flame's horns curved magnificently. She viewed grandchildren of those first lantern scholars mounting kestrel-sized hatchlings under pink dawn. Yet the Queen knew equilibrium still thin as parchment. One early spring dawn she stood on Dragonstone's highest terrace. Sea spread enamel blue. Young dragons cavorted distant thermals like banners of living flame. Beside her Rena, hair streaked white now, mused softly. "We have guided storm into river, but rivers flood as well." Alice nodded. Lanterns must stand higher still. She planned a college of skies. Library fortress to chart weather, star routes, dragon genealogy, ethics. An atlas of flame to answer dark unknowns. Even as she spoke, far east a comet burned violet across dawn. Omen or promise. Dragons turned heads to watch. Night Flame felt at first vibration older than Valyria threading air. Alice closed eyes, listening. Heartbeats multiplied on horizon. Myriad drums heralding age of wings. She inhaled, braced spine. The world had chosen wonder over silence. Now she must shepherd chorus. With sun cresting sea, she walked to Night Flame, placed palm on warm scale, and in language of flame promised to guide, to guard, to learn. Ever onward, lantern raised against gathering twilight. Night over Dragonstone carried the hush of a breath held by the world itself. Queen Alice stood on the terrace above the sea, the waves below black and burnished with starlight, and felt the pulse of wing beats far beyond the horizon. Skyriders on patrol were due home before dawn. A Sand Dornish boy atop the lemon-scaled morning spear, Summer Islander Jaya on copper-winged Dustmaw, and Loras Waters guiding swift Cloud Ghost. Their silhouettes would soon rise against the eastern glow like sparks drifting back to the forge that birthed them. Alice had almost grown accustomed to the trembling note that hummed behind her thoughts, the faint brush of dragon minds hailing hers across leagues. Tonight the music felt thicker, as though more voices tuned themselves to the chord. She touched the signet at her throat, and Night Flame answered without being summoned, blotting out half the stars as he settled on the bloom-shaped yard below. The basalt groaned under his weight, yet the stones had learned his name long ago. They shifted, accepted, stilled. "You sense it too," she whispered while descending the winding stair toward him. Night Flame's breath rolled out in a plume of embers. He had towered once. Now, fully grown, he was a mountain that moved when it wished. He lowered his horned head so her hand could pass along the scar that still traced his flank from Bitterbridge. The scales were smooth where they had regrown, singing with heat beneath her palm. A sentry's lantern bobbed at the yard's entrance. Rena Blackfire emerged with parchment clutched in one fist. The oldest candle in the lantern hall still burned in her, though gray streaked her braid. "A mirror egg has cracked in Cohor," she said without greeting. "A courier raven from the River Junction Maester confirms it. Smoke like a black pillar over the Temple of the Forsaken Wood. One rider claims the hatchling answered his thought before it ever saw him." "How many now since midsummer?" Alice asked, keeping her tone even. 11 counted true, 3 unverified," Rena replied. "Ibn's beast Icegrin has reached full strength. Volantis lost one to river fever, or so they claim. We have 9 bonded here, and 1 unbonded still coaxed by the Cindersworn." Night Flame rumbled low. Alice nodded toward the sea. "Our patrol should have returned an hour past moonrise." Before Rena could answer, Cloud Ghost hissed out of the dark, pale wings reflecting first hints of dawn. The other 2 followed, flame-tipped tails streaking the sky. They glided in tight formation, banking over the inner ward and alighting with practiced ease. Dustmaw's coppery bulk shook the rampart as he landed. Morning Spear chose a lower turret, careful claws clacking on stone. Jaya slid down Dustmaw's shoulder. Hair snapped free of its braid by wind. Loras dismounted next, soaked in sweat though the air bit chill. They strode toward the queen, bows of respect smoothing into worried frowns. 3 sails west of the gullet, Jaya reported. Her voice still held the sweet cadence of the islands, but urgency hardened it. Long, narrow hulls, striped canvas, Myrish build, scorpion arms locked and loaded. They turned out to sea once they marked us, but their prows were aiming straight for Blackwater before. "Numbers?" Rena asked. "Only those 3 within sight line," Loras answered. "Wind at their backs. They had something on deck. Looked like Draman towers, but the sides were sheathed in bronze." "Flame-proof plating," Rena muttered. "Or a test," Alice said, "probing how quickly our watch responds." Jaya drew a red-streaked satchel from her belt. "Hauled this from the sea after we routed them." She tipped the contents onto a stone bench, shards of gray-green crystal that crackled quietly in the cool air. They smoked where dew touched them. "Shadow glass bombs," Rena breathed.
Vorlok Kreft.
"Those hulls may fly Mir's pennant, but someone in Karth funds the cargo." Alice met Jaya's eyes. "Any survivors?" "We scorched the aft tower of the lead ship. 2 sailors jumped. Morning Spear dived to snatch them but lost footing in the rigging. By the time we circled, the sailors had drowned." Night Flame scraped talons across basalt, impatient. Alice stepped forward till her cloak brushed Jaya's bracer. "You chose caution over slaughter. Good." Then louder for all 3. "Your judgment carries this realm more than fire does." Jaya bowed again, Dustmaw crooning behind her as though echoing praise. Loras rubbed ache from his shoulder. In their faces Alice saw the future. One forged of dragons, but steered by children determined not to be monsters. By noon, the War Council gathered in Dragonstone's Hall of 7 Lanterns. Each bronze lamp burned a different oil. Sandalwood, pine pitch, myrhh, clove, bloodroot, lavender, and dragonbone essence. The scents mingled into a spiced haze that comforted some, unsettled others. Grand Maester Karen stiffly ascended 3 steps despite his joints. Ser Duncan came leaning on a white oak cane but still a living fortress. The Bravosi Auditor Viler sat scribbling marginalia. Lady Olenna had long since returned to High Garden, but her proxy, sharp-witted grandson Ser Mace, sent word that rose banners stood ready. Ibn Stormseer attended in furs smelling of brine, calm where once he had trembled before Night Flame's shadow. A chart of Essos lay open on the central slab. Inked dragons marked hatch sites with checkmarks for bonded beasts, red crosses for confirmed rogue kills. The markings clustered like campfires across the continent now. This cannot continue ungoverned, Karen croaked, tapping Qohor with a quill that shook nearly as much as his hand. The Temple of the Forsaken would sit on veins of blackroot gas. A single untrained dragon might turn half that city into smoke. Viler folded parchment. And lenders will strangle trade if premiums spike again. The last Stepstones fiasco cost the free cities more than the Narrow Sea War. Stormseer chuffed. Fire tests ice. Only strongest will endure. Ser Duncan's cane rapped once. Fire kills fool and wise alike. Rena had stood silent until now. She drew a slender rod the color of dried blood, a new variant of her scale sensor. We can measure imbalances in draconic resonance. My experiments suggest an unbonded dragon's aura frays into violence when forced into hunger or pain, but bonds form faster if empathic conditioning begins at hatching. The College of Skies must include nurseries for eggs surrendered voluntarily. Ser Mace raised a blonde brow. Surrendered? And if Ibn's clan hoards eggs grown from stolen brood flames? Then we entice, Rena replied. Knowledge, trade rights, healing herbs, whatever speaks to them louder than greed. Failing that, we confiscate through strength of arms, but only if ledger corroborates imminent threat.
Kuan sight.
Always the ledger. Quills scratched holes in my life. Alice placed both palms on the table and leaned forward. The ledger is quill and parchment, but it is also trust. Without it we slip back to storms and ashes. We will dispatch envoys to Ibn, Qohor, and Volantis, one accompanied by Night Flame for deterrence, another escorted by Dustmaw for proof of merciful intent. We bring riders as teachers, not conquerors. She fixed Stormseer with steady gaze. You will guide the mission to your homeland. Speak the language of snow and fire to your king among snow. Stormseer's eyes gleamed like amber caught in fog. I will carry lantern words, he said. Rena slid a sealed scroll across the chart. Teacher's Doctrine, Dragon Cognitive Framework, Feeding Safe Zones, Resonance Meditation. Translate as needed.
Sedunkans Shindipat.
And the Myrish Scorpion ships? His deep voice hung like a suspended axe. Night Flame, Morning Spear, and Cloud Ghost will patrol the gullet daily, Alice said. But they will not destroy any vessel unless fired upon. We mount watch posts on Maiden Isle and Driftmark with beacon mirrors. And we dispatch sea lances, fast longboats, to board suspicious ships, seize contraband bombs. Viler scratched lines onto his ledger. Funding. Ser Mace cleared his throat. The Reach can float the crown a harvest tithe, grain in exchange for sea protection. My grandmother approves. Karen coughed a laugh. Rose petals conceal thorns. Better thorns than wildfire, said Rena. The council adjourned as late afternoon sunlight spilled like molten gold through arrow slits. Alice lingered, gazing over the map. The marks of threat looked like stars, too many to count, yet each requiring different light. She closed her eyes, attuned herself to Night Flame. He waited beyond the walls, but through their link she felt his restlessness. He yearned for skies unsullied by politic, yet he stood ready should she command him into flame again. She had once feared his power could topple the lantern of mercy her grandsire lit. Now she wondered if the lantern's very glow had drawn all these wings to the world. Wonders invite wonder-seekers and thieves. Her thoughts scattered as Jaya entered silently, bow in hand, quiver empty. The girl stared past her queen at the map. Permission to speak? Always. I have dreams, Jaya whispered. They began after Dustmaw healed. I see a storm of wings above the shy-made sea, dragons swarming like locusts, devouring moonlight. But then a great lantern, bigger than any fortress, rises and the dragons settle on its roof like roosting gulls. Is it prophecy? Alice studied her. In Valyrian lore, prophecy is stone softened by heat. It can be shaped if hands are quick enough. She touched Jaya's shoulder. Keep dreaming, then help me carve the stone. Winter's edge came early that year, blown in on winds carrying both snow and volcanic ash from fissures beneath Valyria's smoking sea. Skies reddened at dusk, scattering dragon silhouettes into silhouettes of fire-streaked clouds. Across the realm harvests were good enough, yet anxiety gnawed. At the College of Skies, still rising stone by etched stone on a cliff east of King's Landing, masons labored through whirling flurries. Vaulted halls designed to echo dragon calls would someday hold thousands of scrolls. For now, tarps snapped across unfinished arches. Rena oversaw work, chalking glyphs that guided acoustics. One hall to soothe hatchlings, another to amplify rider commands across leagues. On a frost-silvered morning, a messenger sprinted up the scaffold ladders, cloak plastered with ice. Cohor's highsmith had signed the covenant addendum. They would ship 3 eggs to Dragonstone under guard. Rena's heart soared until the messenger unfurled second parchment. Volantis had announced intention to found its own sky temple and protect Valyrian birthright from Western interlopers. Their twin riders claimed they tamed a brood of 5. Rena envisioned rogue hatchlings raised by tiger priests who taught them fear as fuel. She descended scaffold with urgency racing blood. That night she and Alice stood before the burned-in map again, candlelight flickering like distant towns on the table's relief. We must intercept those eggs before they reach Volantis, Rena urged. Not thieves, escorts. Offer safe passage to Dragonstone. Show Volantis cooperation is a net of gold, not a leash of iron. Alice paced, cloak sweeping embers of brazier. And if they refuse? Then we entreat their twins to observe our methods. Show them we do not breed war. Alice halted, glancing to Nightflame's silhouette beyond the window. Yes, he perched on tower spire, keeping vigil. Send Loras and Cloud Ghost, she said. Their speed outruns suspicion. And dispatch Mace Tyrell's fastest grain ship to carry token barrels of arbor gold as gift. Generosity preempts blades. The plan set, she wrote letters until dawn. The expedition sailed on waters calm as Mercury. Cloud Ghost soared overhead, wings flashing silver with every rise of sun. They reached the Cohoric Isles where Cohor's convoy waited, 3 stout galleys bearing ironwood crates cooled by shaved ice. Each crate swaddled a dragon egg, 1 slate blue, 1 ember red, 1 pearl streaked with dusk lilac. Loras bowed before unsealing each long enough to verify temperature and resonance. He whispered lullabies he had learned from Rena. The eggs thrummed faint reply. Volantis escort arrived early, sleek Dramans painted with black and orange stripes. The tiger-masked twins stood at prow, cloaks snapping like pennants. Their dragons, Flamestar and Siren Claw, circled above, tails entwined one moment then snapping loose like lightning. The meeting drifted on tense currents of salt air. Brace yourselves for sermon, Loras muttered to Jaya as they climbed Cloud Ghost's saddle. She rode Dustmaw as auxiliary guard. Indeed, the twins launched into florid speech. Blood of old Valyria must not be diluted by foreign lanterns. But as they prattled, the eggs hummed louder, almost eager for Westerosi voices. Loras offered to let the twins witness Dragonstone's nurseries. Pride warred with curiosity in their eyes. Negotiations adjourned at dusk. The convoy set a cautious course west. Dragons alternated watch, Cloud Ghost making lazy loops while Flamestar and Sirenclaw prowled ahead. Night passed peaceful beneath veiled moon, until horns blared from Drummond decks before dawn. Sails burned with green fire. Shadowglass bombs rained from a cliff of cloud. Carthene wind carpets striking from above. Warlocks shrieked invocations, their pale eyes glimmering cobalt. Chaos unfurled. Flamestar dodged, but Sirenclaw caught a bomb. Green flames sluiced across her flank, clinging like sap. She dove, shrieking, slamming into Cloud Ghost's flight path. Loras yanked reins, jerked sideways, but a stray shard slashed his thigh. Blood splattered saddle. Below, a bomb punched through the Cohoric galley's deck. The ice crates cracked. Red and slate eggs rolled free. They glowed brighter as they tasted heat. Jaya urged Dustmaw into a hammering climb. She remembered Night Flame's old egg song. She sang, voice sliced by wind. Dustmaw looped under the tumbling bombs, flames licking harmless along scales. He scooped the slate egg into one netted harness. Jaya unstrapped her cape to wrap it. Cloud Ghost lurched as Loras steadied. He shouted at the warlocks, but they hurled more spheres. Suddenly the pearl egg burst out of shattered crate, plunging toward sea. Sirenclaw, half-burned, streaked after it, rider clutching horns. Flames hissed. Eggshell met dragonfire in midair and cracked. Sea steam roared upward. Rena, back in Dragonstone Library, jolted awake as resonance stung her mind. Something hatching in terror. She sent ravens frantic. On the water, Sirenclaw recoiled, rider screaming. From the shattered pearl rose a hatchling pale as moon milk, dripping yolk and seawater. It latched onto Sirenclaw's wound, biting. Sirenclaw flipped, smashing hatchling against masthead, but the newborn clung with needle talons. The warlocks chanted, weaving chains of glassy smoke. The hatchling's eyes turned violet, mirroring Alice's line, yet filled with feral horror. Dustmaw banked toward them. Jaya reached for bolus laced with lullaby bells. She flung. Ropes tangled hatchling's winglets. Sirenclaw shook free, streaking east with hatchling entangled. Flamestar followed, rider shouting curses at warlocks still bombarding galleys. Cloud Ghost plummeted to shield the red egg rolling across splintered deck. Loras winced at gash in thigh but held focus, humming cradle song. The egg quieted. Warlocks retreated in face of dragon fury, their carpets dispersed like torn banners. By sunrise, only Dustmaw, Cloud Ghost, and one scorched Cohoric galley remained. They lost the slate eggs containing crate, saved, but now warming dangerously. The red egg safe beneath smoldering sailcloth. The pearl hatchling unknown, flying east with blood-mad Sirenclaw. The twins stood stunned on charred deck. Pride shattered by chaos, they accepted escort west. Loras collapsed, fever burning. Jaya applied poultice, then steered Dustmaw beneath sails to cool eggs. Back in Dragonstone, Night Flame roared the story through Bond. Alarm shimmering through Rena's skull. Alice convened muster. She needed fleets, healers, riders ready to chase rogue hatchling. But first she tended Loras upon his return. His wound black-rimmed from shadowglass poison. Maesters fought to draw heat. Alice sat at his bedside, Night Flame curling tale about tower below. Guardian faithful. She held Loras's hand through delirium until fever broke 3 nights later. On the 4th dawn, Rena placed slate egg, now eased into state of drowsing heat, upon a quartz pedestal inside the as-yet unfinished nursery. Cohoric stewards watched, humbled, signing forms committing future eggs to lantern care. The red egg, more temperamental, throbbed with restless pulses. They named it Emberheart and placed extra cooling stones around shell. Volantis twins lingered, shaken. Alice offered library access. They accepted. Over weeks they read treatises, studied Dustmaw's healing, saw Loras rise from B. At thanks to dragon-heated poultices. Their arrogance thawed into wary respect. But news from Stepstone struck like a hammer. Sirenclaw and the Pearl Hatchling, dubbed Palebite by sailors, had torched 3 pirate dens, melted a Volantine outpost, and vanished toward the Basilisk Isles. Rogue dragons bred havoc. Blame fell upon Crown. Bravo's bankers threatened penalty clauses. Free city alliances sagged. Alice drafted proclamations, establishing joint aerial brigades, cross-realm search patrols under Lantern Banner, open bounty for safe reporting of unbonded sightings, reward scrolls, not steel. Stormseer volunteered Icegrin for South Patrol. Morning Spear and Copper Dustmaw rotated Stepstone's watch. Night Flame remained central pivot, yet Palebite's trail ran cold. Basilisk Isles teemed with jungle so thick dragons could sleep unseen beneath canopy. Warlocks of Unburnt Tower might already be courting the feral pair. Rena predicted. She felt pressure waves across Resonance Net, like drums echoing beneath earth. They seek to open gates no king can close, she told Queen. Alice gathered riders in the yet roofless amphitheater of College of Skies. Snow swirled through broken arches. Torches lashed. She spoke without throne, standing among them equal. Lantern flame is knowledge. Dragons are its reflection. We bear light into places used to dark. Those who fear light will throw stones. Those who crave it will follow. We do not answer hatred with hatred, but we do not shy from fire when needed. Night Flame chuffed beyond walls, a living punctuation to her creed. She announced the first Sky Quest, a search into Basilisk Isles jungles to locate Palebite, heal Sirenclaw, quell Warlock Cabal. Jaya, Stormseer, and Loras would lead. Volantis twins offered themselves as guides. Rena would helm Scholastic Staff, mapping resonance. Ser Duncan, near 95 but unyielding, insisted on joining as ground captain. Old bones, no traps of jungle, he rumbled. Alice clasped his wrist. Return, she whispered. He winked. The expedition launched under half moon. Dragons soared in V formation, lantern-strapped saddles gleaming. Galleys below carried supplies, healers, spell wards. Night Flame remained with Queen, heart heavy yet mind steady. Days later, cloud-smothered tropics swallowed the team. Reports came of steaming valleys where twisted obsidian monoliths jutted like broken tusks. Resonance readings spiked. Then ravens stopped. A silence deeper than night. Alice spent restless pacing hours on Dragonstone ramparts. Night Flame prowled also, tail lashing. Rena's last letter said, found web of glass towers sprouting from Crater Lake. Warlocks weaving dragon dreams into sky. Dustmaw senses siren call. The Queen knew waiting risked all. She saddled Night Flame before dawn, leaving Regency in Karen's hands. She flew south across clouds laced with volcanic dust, alone save 2 escort riders. Wind knifed skin. Night Flame's furnace heart warmed her bones. On 6th day she sighted the Isles. Green knots in slate sea, smoke curling between peaks. A thunderclap split sky. Lightning of unnatural hue veined cumulonimbus above Crater Lake. Night Flame roared. A reply shriek. Sirenclaw, or Palebite now mature? Below, jungle canopy exploded outward as 2 dragons leapt skyward entwined. One copper with violet-heeled scars. One pale sheen streaked with ghostly blue. Dustmaw and Morning Spear banked behind them, riders clinging. Warlock carpets swarmed like moths, hurling blue fire.
Night Flame folded wings. Dove?
Howled. Alice's vision narrowed to vortex of color. Green jungle, white lightning, black smoke. She unsheathed Shepherd's Mercy, Valyrian steel dagger once worn by Egg, and kissed the hilt. Battle became symphony. Night Flame's inferno cauterizing clouds. Palebite's scream pitching illusions of shattering mirrors. Sirenclaw turning on her warlock masters, tails whipping carpets into spin. Rena on Dustmaw wove lullaby bells. Their chimes slipped through storm to reach hatchling hearts. Lightning struck monolith. Shards flew. Duncan's ground units fired scorpion bolts tipped with sleep needle resin. One lodged in Palebite's wing, seeping calm. The young dragon faltered, flapping uneven. Sirenclaw dove to catch him, old bond reasserting through pain. Alice urged Night Flame between warlocks and wounded pair. She called out in clear Valyrian, "We are flame singers, not chains. Come home. Through bond she opened memory of Dragonstone Nursery. Warm coals, soft chimes, eggs stirred by gentle hands. Palebite's mind pressed hers. A whirlpool of hunger and fear. She steadied it with calm images. Warlocks shrieked curses. Their leader, shrouded in sapphire fumes, flung last glass orb. Night flames snapped jaws, swallowing sphere whole. Blue fire exploded inside gullet, but he belched it skyward, scattering harmless over sea. Then Siren Claw banked, dragging Palebite toward Night Flame. Jaya and Dustmaw swooped beneath, providing updraft. Stormseer on Icegrin breathed frost mist to temper heat around wounded wings. Within heartbeats, the battle collapsed into uneasy truce. Warlocks fled, carpets tattering. Monoliths cracked, resonance field dissipating. Riders coaxed Palebite to cliff ledge, extracted bolt. Heel bandages dipped in dragonbone salve sealed wound. Siren Claw nosed her hatchmate, crooning. A bond formed not of bloodline pride but shared hurt. At dusk, lanterns dotted clearing as ground crews erected triage tents. Alice walked among them, cloak singed, heartbeat still sinking with Night Flame's deep rumble. She stopped at Rena's side, the older woman's cheeks streaked with soot. They clasped hands, silent relief louder than any hymn. Duncan approached, helmet tucked under arm. Jungle will burn for days, he noted. But Warlock hold broken. Alice surveyed ravaged canopy. No victory in ashes, only lesson. We must build outposts here. Teach locals how to coexist with wings. Hard soil, Duncan warned. Hard soil grows strongest roots, she answered. Night settled with heavy humidity, but stars blazed unmuted. Dragons lay in semicircle around camp, tails touching. Night Flame largest, Dustmaw gleaming copper, Icegrin frost-rimmed, Morning Spear bright lemon. Siren Claw curled protector-like around Palebite who slept, chest rising slow. Jaya strummed island harp by small brazier. Loras stitched his own torn sleeve. Volantis twins huddled over scrolls, scribbling field observations. Stormseer polished ivory talisman inscribed with new glyph, lantern crossing Iceclaw. Rena spread parchment across tree stump desk, mapping new resonance flows. She murmured, "The web widens. We must weave order faster." Alice stared at comet scars in upper sky. She sensed dragons across world humming, some still eggs, some plotting their first flight. The College of Skies would need wings of parchment as vast as Night Flame's stretch, and the world would need hearts willing to bear weight of wonder. She raised eyes to her dragon. Night Flame met gaze with ember eyes, tired yet unbroken. She smiled. "To work, my friend." He exhaled a warm gust that stirred campfires, setting lanterns to dancing. And the age of lanterns and wings pressed onward, its tale for generations long already, still etching itself in flame across the night.